Chapter 107. Another day. The sun rose from the east. On the horse track, List shouted, "Multiple phantom arrows." The 6 arrows in front and behind issued a fierce air-piercing sound as they chased each other in the air. In an instant they collided with each other, and then their trajectories became disorderly, not forming a formation. There were only 2 arrows stuck in the target 100 meters away. Failed. List shook his head. Of course he failed again. His current level of archery was not good enough to display the profoundness of the multiple phantom arrows. In addition, he had not touched the bow and arrow for several days, so his level even faintly regressed a little. The same was true for the cultivation of chi techniques. Fortunately, he was already very skilled in the most basic part of the multiple arrows, the dual arrows. It was enough for the Earth Knight to be able to effectively display the dual arrows on the battlefield. List glanced at the nearby Marcus, who was drilling the Knight squad. Just yesterday, another young member had cultivated chi and became his retainer knight. Of the 12 members, half had already become trainee knight with beginner chi. Once all of them had cultivated chi, it was time to set out to clear the Thorns Ridge. Before this winter, we must capture the Thorns Ridge. List did not disturb Marcus's teaching. He handed the equipment to the retainer knight and rode back to the castle. Take a bath. Prepare to eat breakfast. Butler Carter stood to the side and reported to him. Master, the town's baker Rayner and Mrs. Abby have cooperated and have successfully made a new type of bread. Do you want to try it now? Is that so? The bread is ready, hurry up and bring it. The new bread did not look like the meat floss bread he had imagined, but rather a round steamed bun shape with a cracked surface. Thick cream could be seen flowing in the cracks. What kind of bread is this? It doesn't have a name yet and is waiting for you to name it, Master. Mrs. Abby said that it is made from flour, eggs, and cream. It is divided into 2 parts, the inside and the outside. The outer skin is a bit troublesome to make, but the cracks after baking are very beautiful. Carter explained the method of making the new bread in detail. List had already picked one up and taken a bite. The aroma of butter mixed with the aroma of bread and lingered in his mouth, stimulating his taste buds. It was much more delicious than plain white bread. The smell, this look. List said directly, "Mr. Carter, tell Mrs. Abby and Rayner to call it a pineapple bun." Pineapple bun, what an iconic name. In the future, I'll change my breakfast from white bread to pineapple buns. I don't have to change my lunch and dinner. Contact Sherlock, the Thorns Caravan and Renault. Let's see if we can sell the pineapple buns in North Valley City. List instantly arranged the sales plan for the pineapple buns. After thinking for a moment, he continued, "In addition, tell Rayner and Mrs. Abby that as a reward for inventing a new type of bread, 10 silver coins each. Also, if you have any ideas, continue to invent. The more flavors of bread, the better." He wanted to say that everyone would be rewarded with a gold coin. Recently, he had made a lot of money from selling black pearls. His wallet was bulging and he was full of heroic spirit. However, the reward of a gold coin was the same as the reward for discovering a sprite worm and cultivating a magic ingredient, which was too exaggerated. It was just bread to satisfy the appetite of the stomach, nothing more. It was not worth too much reward. Therefore it was changed to 10 silver coins. Carter left. He slowly tasted the pineapple bun, very satisfied that he was not being generous. Those who are not in charge do not know the price of firewood and rice. The Lord does not have any surplus food at home. Slowly. Faint smoke floated before his eyes, twisting and squirming to form serpentines. Mission completed. Reward, treasure shipwreck. After a while, the text dispersed, the smoke recondensed, and a new mission was issued. Mission: Costo has been distressed recently. Ever since he became the navigational teacher of the Night Squad, teaching has been difficult. The Night Squad disdains navigational knowledge. Please correct the youngster's attitude. Reward: variant thorns. The treasure shipwreck is finally in hand. The Night Squad is unwilling to learn navigational knowledge? It seems that there may be a certain connection between the mission reward and the new mission. Probably only Costo can discover the treasure shipwreck. He shook the bell and called the old butler, who had not gone far. "My lord, send someone to bring Captain Costo here, I have something to ask him." "Yes, my lord." About half an hour later, Costo arrived at the castle. "My apologies, my lord, I was snorkeling at the beach and was delayed for a while." "Snorkeling?" "I was practicing my swimming and underwater fighting skills. Although I am not a knight, I still desire to fight. How is the Night Squad learning from you recently?" "This." Costo hesitated. "Just say it." Your retainer night squad is very unfriendly towards the learning of navigational knowledge. They don't even like to learn how to swim, let alone teach them how to sail. They always say that a knight relies on a warhorse, not a sailboat. Moreover, Mr. Marcus takes up a lot of the night squad's time. List instantly understood. Although Marcus had been subdued by him and began to follow him loyally, he understood that the sea could also provide wealth. But deep down he still worshipped the glory of a knight and the warhorse's charge. He felt that ships only needed to send them to fight on land, and there was no need to learn any navigational knowledge. So he transmitted his ideas to the retainer night squad and squeezed into Costo's teaching time. As for Marcus, List sighed slightly. It was easy to change a person's identity, but it was a bit difficult to change a person's ideas. Fortunately, he could use the Lord's dignity. He immediately summoned Marcus and the night squad and had them gather at the castle gate. List began to lecture. From today on, all of you will spend half a day learning navigational knowledge from Captain Costo. Within 3 days you must learn how to swim. If you can't learn, 50 lashes. After a week, I will examine your navigational knowledge. If you can't answer a question, 10 lashes. The youngsters were hesitant to speak. List ignored them. He called Marcus into the study. Teacher Marcus, you should know why I'm looking for you, right? Marcus said solemnly, Sir, I don't think the night squad needs to be distracted by learning how to sail. We do need to cross the ocean by ship and go to the continent. Let ordinary sailors operate the ship while we night squad focus on fighting. The Coral Island Orders of Chivalry also continue this method of fighting. His words had some truth to them. The night squad belonged to the army, but List asked them to become the navy. Naturally, they were unwilling. However, List had his own ideas. How many of the night squad do you think can become an Earth Knight? Or when can they become Earth Knight? I think someone should be able to become an Earth Knight before the age of 20. Philip and Xavier are quite talented. Marcus replied. I have painstakingly trained them, but I can only obtain 2 Earth Knight squads. Then, can they form a squad of night squads and go to the continent's battlefield? I am willing to fight to the death for Sir Ling. I appreciate your kindness, but this is impulsive stupidity. Flower Town is still developing. I have already purchased a large number of serfs. In the future, I will select enough outstanding youngsters to train. Now, what I need are instructors who have mastered all kinds of basic abilities, not good-for-nothings who are proficient in fighting. What do you mean? Teacher Marcus, some of these night squads will become the backbone of the night squad, while others will helm ships in the future and transport my night squad to the continent to compete for minerals. Divide the work and perform their respective duties. Do you understand? List's expression was indifferent, but his eyes were stern. Chapter 108. List simply punished Marcus by deducting his salary for a month. His main purpose was to help Costo complete the smoke mission. So he asked the members of the night squad to learn how to swim in 3 days. To swim, they must go into the sea, which may bring them into contact with the shipwrecked treasure. He wanted to know what the shipwrecked treasure was as soon as possible. Was it full of gold coins or bright jewels? Or was there a dragon egg hidden there? But then again, is the dragon born from the dragon egg? In the night novel, there were many different opinions about the origin of the dragon, and there had been no accurate answer. He asked the Count, but the Count did not know where the dragon came from. This was an unsolved mystery. The night squad soon began their swimming lessons. List did not go to patrol. It would not be too late to come back when there were clues about the shipwrecked treasure. He was going to the thorns worms wormstalk bushes. The reward of the new mission was a mutant type of thorns. He wanted to check to see if he could get the reward in advance. The previous fast-growing type of thorns was not a magic ingredient. This time, the mutant type of thorns was likely to be a magic ingredient. There were large patches of thorns half the height of a person. But disappointingly, after casting Magic Eye, there was no trace of magic power. No magic ingredient. Maybe the mission has not been completed, so the magic ingredient has not successfully mutated? He called out the smoke mission and found that the mission had not been completed. In other words, the teenager's attitude had not been corrected. Ideological education is not enough. It seems that I have to go to the seaside and see who is still resisting sailing lessons. He turned to his valet Thomas and said, Go back to the castle, get my whip, and then go to the seaside to find me. Yes, master. Ideological education was not very effective just by talking about it. He must use the whip to let them achieve the unity of spirit and flesh in pain and remember the lesson. Crack, crack. With a gloomy face, List whipped the 2 young night boys who were afraid of the sea. The residents of a coastal island town were afraid of going into the water. Between the whip and the sea, the two young knight boys finally chose the sea. Under Costo's guidance, they began to paddle like dogs. Liszt summoned the smoke mission and finally saw a change. Mission complete. Reward: poisonous mutated fast-growing thorns. Mission: the newly rooted black nightshade doesn't seem to be able to adapt to the flower town's soil. Although it is nutritious, but it is unable to absorb it very quickly. The magic power that was as gentle as water was draining away bit by bit. It might be dying soon, please help it gather magic power. Reward: 1 sprite worm. Nightshade was included in the smoke mission. Liszt was convinced that it was indeed giving birth to a sprite worm, but the problem was very serious. It is not acclimatized, unable to absorb sufficient nutrients, and losing its magic power, indicating that the sprite worm is about to miscarry. How should I help it condense its magic power? It's not Dosen who can release magic just by stimulating it. He was stumped by the question. Just then Costo, who was teaching the night squad swimming lessons, suddenly swam back from the sea and shouted, Sir Lord, I found a sunken ship." He trotted over to Liszt. "A sunken ship. It is the wreckage of a sunken ship not far ahead, half of it is buried in sand." "A sunken ship?" Liszt retracted his train of thought and quickly responded, "Captain Costo, salvage it. I need help. I will have Gort support you. How long will it take for you to salvage it?" "Please rest assured, the sea at the sunken ship's location is not deep. When the tide is low, it will only be about 5 meters deep. At that time I can dive into the water and tie up the sunken ship, while the people on the shore can directly pull it out of the mud." "When will the tide be low today?" "Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Get ready." The sunken ship treasure trove had entered a countdown. Liszt felt relieved. Unable to salvage it for the time being, Liszt once again returned to the thorns worm stalk thicket. He was looking for the poisonous mutated fast-growing thorns rewarded by the smoke mission. Poisonous mutated, does it mean poisonous thorns? It can be directly called fast-growing poisonous thorns. Still not a magic ingredient. It was a bit disappointing. But Liszt felt that perhaps the reward was far more than that. This seems to be a chain mission about the evolution of thorns worm. At first it was a fast-growing thorns reward, but now there are fast-growing poisonous thorns. This thorns bush has become more and more interesting. Returning to the bushes, he did not cast Magic Eye again. In the morning he used Magic Eye to find the magic ingredient, and now he wanted to find the poisonous thorns. Such a large bush was full of thorns, and there was a feeling of not knowing where to start. He did not know what the fast-growing poisonous thorns looked like. He could only mobilize his retainer knight, look for unusual thorns. Remember, don't touch them at will, they may be poisonous. The 6th retainer knight took the order and began to search in the bushes. Liszt and his valet Thomas were also searching. This search went on for several hours. In total, he searched the bushes 3 times and even asked the servants to send food over. Of course, Liszt did not look for long. In fact, he hid under the shade of a nearby wild fruit tree, enjoyed the ice cream sent by the servants and watched the others work. Finally, in the afternoon, under the scorching sun, the serfs who were sent to look for unusual thorns found a special thorn. This thorn was mixed in the bushes. It was not a normal cyan stem with small thorns, but a stem with purple stripes. The purple stripes added a touch of mystery to it. Moreover, every small thorn grew on top of the purple stripes and was also purple. Is this a fast-growing poisonous thorns? Liszt decided to give it a try. He asked someone to bring a rabbit raised in the castle, and then used the small thorns on the purple stripes to cut the rabbit. The small thorns broke in an instant, and purple juice gushed out, mixing with the rabbit's wound. After a moment, the rabbit twitched and fell to the ground dead. Tsk. Sir, this thorn is highly poisonous. The rabbit didn't even last a quarter of an hour. If it had been a human, I'm afraid they wouldn't have survived after being cut by such thorns. Blair, who had been in charge of recording the growth of the thorns worm's worm stalk, clicked his tongue in amazement. Liszt was satisfied with the experiment. Reward this serf with 10 silver coins. The serf thanked him profusely and left. The other serfs also thanked him and left. Although they didn't receive a reward, each of them received a copper coin as payment. They earned a copper coin for less than 2 hours of easy work. What a lucky job. Looking at the fast-growing poisonous thorns, Liszt already thought of how to use them. Blair, I have a new task for you. Please instruct me. Vigorously cultivate a batch of fast-growing poisonous thorns. In the future, I will plant fast-growing poisonous thorns on both sides of the road in the Thorns Ridge. My castle also needs to be decorated with deterrent green fences. Chapter 109. The East Coast. The tide receded, leaving a large number of seashells, starfish, crabs, and other seafood on the beach soaked in seawater. Fishermen had already begun to fish out the seafood. List rode on Black Dragon. He watched a large group of barefoot people bustling about on the beach. They were busy connecting ropes, finding practically all the ropes in the town and twisting them into one. Costo dived to the location of the sunken ship and tied the rope to the keel of the sunken ship. He swam back and beckoned to the crowd, "Pull! We can pull." Dozens of serfs, like trackers on the Volga River, took heavy steps and instantly tightened the ropes. Under Gort's command, they shouted slogans and exerted their strength. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The slogans came one after another. The ropes tightened around their shoulders, relaxing and tightening in accordance with the rhythm of their bodies. Step by step, they sunk their feet deep into the yellow sand. Some of them were old men in their 50s, some were young teenagers doing the same work. Their clothes were tattered, their faces were dark, their hair was stuck to their foreheads and sweat was dripping down. They really looked like the trackers on the Volga River. But they were not. Liszt had seen Repin's famous painting Trackers on the Volga River. It was in the language textbook. In the painting, the trackers towed boats by the river all year round. Life had ravaged them to the point of numbness. The flower town's temporary trackers, on the other hand, had smiles on their faces, even though the sun was blazing above their heads. That was because each person could earn a copper coin for this trip as a hauler. The Sir Lord who came from the Great Tulip Castle was generous and benevolent, bringing them plenty of food and jingling copper coins and even silver and gold coins. Life had never been so full of hope. 1, 2, 3. Harder. Gort yelled from the side, "You lazy guys, haven't you eaten?" On the surface of the sea, Costo kept diving and surfacing, shouting, "More strength, the hull has been pulled out. More strength, the bow will be pulled out." He shouted a few times. Costo shouted again, "It's a success. The sunken ship has been successfully pulled out of the mud and sand." After they pulled it out, the trackers became even more relaxed. They easily dragged the wrecked ship to the beach. The sunken ship covered in green algae could no longer be seen. There was only one mast left and it was broken. The hull was full of holes and from time to time crabs would crawl out. "Sir, the sunken ship has been salvaged," Gort said excitedly. Costo also came over and said, "It's an old brig. Judging from its shape, it should be a ship from 100 years ago. Sir Lord, this should be a ship of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. 100 years ago, only the Grand Duchy could build a brig." Liszt rode on his horse and circled around the sunken ship. "A sunken ship from 100 years ago? Then it's a merchant ship? Or a warship?" "It should be a merchant ship. The cabin is sealed and used to transport goods. Then what are we waiting for? Teacher Gort, get someone to dismantle this 100-year-old cargo ship. I want to see what's left in its hold." "As you wish." Building a ship was difficult, but dismantling it was quick. After a while, the cabin was smashed open. Some patrolmen went in and pulled out some cloth that had been soaked in seawater, as well as some grain remains. This was probably a merchant ship that transported cloth and grain, and it had sunk for some unknown reason. Could it be that this is all there is to the treasure of the sunken ship? Liszt expressed his disbelief. As expected. One of the patrolmen suddenly shouted, there are a few chests here. They are intact and the locks have not been opened. Quickly move the chests out. Give me a hammer, the chests are stuck in the bones of the ship. I have to hammer the wood." After tossing and turning, a total of 5 large chests were dragged out of the cabin of the sunken ship and placed on the beach. Costo looked at the chests a few times and came to a conclusion. "Sir Lord, this should be redwood. It is strong and durable and it has obviously been waterproof. There must be something valuable in the chests." Liszt revealed a smile. "In that case, move them to my castle." "That's right, everyone who participated in the salvage this time will be paid double. Captain Costo found the sunken ship, so he will be rewarded with a gold coin." He had not yet seen what was in the chest. He immediately began to distribute the rewards. The purpose was to encourage his subjects to discover, explore and contribute more good things to him. At the same time, this gold coin was also to encourage Costo to recruit apprentice sailors. He wanted to see if he could really raise a group of qualified sailors. 5 large chests, each as big as a desk, were neatly placed in the hall of the castle. The locks were probably made of brass and had already rusted. Carter guarded the chests and forbade the servants from approaching. Therefore, the maids and serving men could only crowd at the entrance of the hall, curiously sizing up the chests. "Debbie, what do you think is inside? Could there be mermaids? Maybe singing demons? There are singing demons in the sea. The chests are quite old. Even if there were mermaids and singing demons inside, they would have long since become bones." "Not necessarily. I heard that mermaids can live for hundreds of years. I guess it is full of gold coins, no dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire flower town. Jim, think about it. Even if the entire flower town, including you and I, were sold, we would not be able to sell a few dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire Coral Island." Carter turned around and berated the chattering servants. "Have you forgotten the etiquette of aristocracy? Do your jobs well and don't pay attention to matters that have nothing to do with you, understand?" Mrs. Morrison also came downstairs. She swept the maids with a glance and fixed her gaze on Maggie. "Master studies hygiene is not up to standard. There are even debris in the corners. Maggie, this is your dereliction of duty. You need to clean it again." "Yes, Mrs. Morrison." Maggie nodded in agreement and hurriedly went to get the cleaning tools. Under the rebuke of the two stewards, the servants did not dare to act rashly and returned to their posts. Only Carter and Morrison were left in the hall. "Master hasn't returned yet?" "Master went to the Black Nightshade field. The Black Nightshade in the field is not very good. Master is trying to find a solution." "I went to see the Black Nightshade. It is indeed not good. Mr. Carter, do you think it can still come back to life?" "I believe it can." Carter smiled slightly, "because Master will save it. The glory of the night favors the flower town, and even more favors the Master." List did not know that his steward trusted him so much. At this time he was looking at the Black Nightshade, which was on the verge of death, frowning as he pondered on how to help it condense magic power. The mission said that magic power as gentle as water is flowing away. Does it mean that the Black Nightshade needs to be replenished with water-attributed magic power? In the fief, only I and Marcus have attributed chi, but they are of the fire and wind attributes respectively. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck. He thought of the black pearls. He had 14 water-attributed black pearls in the gem space. Perhaps I can grind the black pearls and sprinkle them on the Black Nightshade's roots so that it can absorb water-attributed magic power by itself. I don't know if this is the right idea, but at present this is the only way. Making a desperate attempt, he immediately took out a fist-sized black pearl, grinded it, and buried it in the Black Nightshade's roots. Chapter 110. The box was heavy and light. The lock was strong. But this did not stop List from breaking the lock on the lightest box with just a sword imbued with chi. The lock was unlocked and the box was opened. There was no one else in the hall. Carter sent them away and he walked out himself. There might be valuable treasures in the box, but as a servant he should not care. List was very satisfied with Carter's action. Although he believed that Carter was loyal, he could not believe that all the servants were loyal. If they saw a great treasure and told others, it would be troublesome. Don't show your wealth. This principle must be understood. This box is very light, different from the other boxes. What could it contain? Or is there nothing inside? List reached out and slowly lifted the lid. Suddenly, the bright light almost blinded his eyes. The box was filled with strong reflective white metal ores. One by one, the light from the window was reflected everywhere. He blinked his eyes. After adapting to the scattered light, he carefully looked at the white metal ores in the box. He took out an ore and weighed it in his hand. It was almost light, but the texture was definitely metal. It was cold and very hard. He had never seen such a light metal before. To his knowledge, metals were generally very heavy. Of course, he also knew that there was a very light metal, lithium, which was twice as light as water and could float on water. But even lithium was heavier than the metal ore in his hand. Now he felt that he was not holding a piece of metal ore but a piece of foam. He squeezed hard, but the metal ore did not move at all. When he slashed with his sword, he could not cut it. He could only leave a slight mark. It is not foam, nor is it plastic. He looked at the ore in his hand and recalled the night novels he had read. He raised his eyebrows and gradually smiled. I have probably guessed what kind of metal this is. It is as light as a feather and as hard as iron. It is the magic metal, mithril. In this world, the metals were also gold, silver, copper, iron, and aluminum. However, there were also a few special metals that were compatible with magic and were very good magic conductors. They were also essential materials for creating magic equipment. Currently, there were 3 known types of magic metals: mithril, adamantine, and orichalcum. Mithril was light as a feather, adamantine was indestructible, and orichalcum was indestructible. These three magical metals also originated from dragons. It was said that there was a mithril dragon in the unsetting Radiance Empire. In the Knight novels, the Silver Orders of Chivalry often appeared and followed the protagonist into battle. The standard equipment for the members of the Silver Order of Chivalry was a set of shiny mithril magic armor, and they came and went like the wind. Mithril is very valuable, even more valuable than gold. This chest of mithril ore is worth at least 1 dragon coin. List licked his lips in disappointment. The reputation of the treasure was well deserved. He quickly used the space gem to store all the mithril ore, leaving only an empty box. Just this box of mithril ore alone could be said to be a bountiful harvest. However, he had no intention of selling it. He would keep it and use it to forge equipment when he needed it in the future. Touching the red blood sword at his waist, he felt that the red blood sword should also contain a small amount of mithril. Its magic conduction ability was better than that of ordinary adamantine weapons. Even if there was no dragon gem embedded, a weapon mixed with mithril would at least be a magic weapon. Now let's see what's in the second chest. I wonder if there's adamantine or orichalcum. List raised his sword, gently cut off the rusty copper lock and opened the lid. The stench hit his face. He almost vomited from the stench. Inside there were many books stacked neatly. It was unknown how long the books had been stored. The stench from the thick bast paper could be said to be suffocating. List held his breath. List looked at the book at the top. The name was handwritten Serpentines, Rudolph's Alchemy Diary. Alchemy Diary? List's eyes flickered slightly. Alchemists were probably a legendary profession. They might be equivalent to chemists or alchemists. Legend has it that they could use magical alchemy methods to refine ordinary stones into gold. Whoever mastered the mysteries of alchemy would have wealth comparable to that of a country. In Knight novels, the frequency of alchemists' appearances was also quite high. It was just that in reality there were many people with the title of alchemist, but they did not show true alchemy. They just swindled food and drink. List, who had studied physics, did not believe in the existence of alchemy. Of course. In this different world with magic power, God knows if there would really be alchemy. For example, now he saw a diary with the title, Alchemy. It can't really record alchemy, right? Is this to let me grasp the rhythm of alchemy? Am I going to reach the peak of life so soon? List felt his heart begin to beat faster. The profession of alchemist, compared to the top existences such as Dragon Knight, Dragon Lord, Archmage and Dragon Slayer, was absolutely not much worse. With money you could really do whatever you wanted. However, just as he was about to touch the book, the Rudolph's Alchemy Diary, which still looked clear, was instantly broken and then rippled into powder. List's fingers directly passed through the powder and grabbed nothing. In his heart he did not know whether to say it or not. In just the blink of an eye the whole box of books turned into powder. With a light touch, it scattered into a pile. No longer any handwriting could be distinguished, nor could the appearance of the book be seen. The wind blew in from the window, directly rolling up the powder and flying together with the stench. After being stunned for a while, List came back to his senses. He clutched his chest and almost vomited blood. My alchemy! The thick parchment book that had been stored for a long time had already decayed. The diary that recorded alchemy also turned into ashes. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Although he felt that alchemy was unlikely to exist, when a trace of the possibility of alchemy's existence slipped away from his hands, the sense of loss still hit his heart painfully. The box that should have been full of treasures of knowledge had become a pile of waste. He sighed. Reluctantly, he suppressed his uncomfortable mood. Forget it, I was lucky to get it, but if I lose it, it's my fate. Who knows if alchemy is really recorded in the diary? It was an unexpected harvest, and losing it is not enough to shake my mentality. A box of mithril ore is already valuable enough. After comforting himself, he carefully lifted his sword and opened the third box. It was also a book. The top was placed with the cover of 5 books. List learned his lesson and did not directly touch them, but carefully remembered the cover of each book. Steel Ridge Kingdom World of Warcraft Guide, Close Contact with Multi-Horned Magic Rhinoceros, Interesting Stories of the Golden Flash Tower, Colorful Mushrooms of the Red Monkey Forest, Fox Manor on a Rainy Night. The covers of these books were not handwritten serpentines, but printed serpentines. Obviously they were published and sold on the market. Golden Flash Tower? Red Monkey Forest? Fox Manor? He had never heard of these 3 places, but he could conclude that they were all places of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. because only the Steel Ridge Kingdom and its vassal states use serpentines. Including Rudolph, who wrote the Alchemy Diary, they should all be people of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Liszt carefully reached out to touch the book, hoping to open a page. However, he still failed. As soon as the book was touched, it immediately turned into powder, unable to be preserved. Chapter 111. The last 2 boxes did not contain books. To Liszt's surprise, one box contained all kinds of jade and the other box contained all kinds of crystals. Jade and crystal, the value of these 2 boxes is definitely not lower than the value of mithril ore. He picked up a milky white jade. The regret of the disappearance of the books was somewhat diluted. Jade and crystal could be regarded as types of gems. But the origins of the 2 were completely different. Jade came from the earth, like saltpeter and sulfur, which were naturally produced by the earth. Crystal, on the other hand, came from dragons, which were associated with the production of gems by dragons. Dragons could produce gems, which had extraordinary magic power. But gem mines were rare, and more often crystal mines were associated with gem mines. Topaz was around topaz and ruby was around ruby. Crystals also contained magic power, but compared to gems, crystal power was less. Aristocrats liked to use crystal-carved drinking cups. In Liszt's castle, there was a set of such crystal goblets used to entertain distinguished guests. Crystals were also commonly used to make magic lamps, which could be lit day and night until the magic power contained in them was exhausted. Every castle with a name had a crystal lamp. Crystals were also excellent accessories for aristocratic ladies. A crystal necklace could add a lot of elegance to a lady. Jade, originating from the earth, also called magic jade, was also a stone with magic power. But the magic power contained in it had been highly integrated with the jade itself, making it difficult to develop and use, and unable to make magic items. But jade was the best food for sprites. During the transplanting of worm stalks, sprites had to rely on jade to maintain their lives. When contracting sprite worms, jade was also used as bait, and jade was used to make containers for sprites to live in, which would increase the probability of sprites' evolution. Therefore, the value of jade was not lower than that of crystal. Liszt opened the gem space. After putting a box of jade and a box of crystal inside, Liszt shook the bell and called the butler. "Mr. Carter, I have put away the treasures in the boxes. Most of them have been severely damaged over the years, leaving only a few scraps. Have someone move them away and throw them away." He carefully rummaged through the boxes of books. The books were all rotten, leaving no recognizable writing. This was a drawback of thick bast paper which could not be stored for too long. Liszt felt that the lack of historical records in this world must have something to do with the thick bast paper. During the manufacturing process, the thick bast paper would undergo an acidification process so that it could be written on smoothly. However, things that were slightly acidic were prone to chemical reactions and were difficult to preserve for too long. That was how he understood it. Although there are some regrets, overall, the treasures from the shipwreck have made me a windfall. Very good. Liszt thought to himself. His mood gradually became better. Therefore, he asked the kitchen to hold a barbecue for the banquet. Gort, Marcus, and the others had also come to participate. They also knew that Liszt had obtained a bountiful harvest today, but they rationally did not ask what the treasures were. For 3 consecutive days, Liszt was paying close attention to Nightshade's condition. The transplanted black nightshade had already adapted to the new soil and environment and was beginning to regain its vitality. The green leaves were full of vigor, those that should be blooming continued to bloom, and those that should be bearing fruit continued to bear fruit. Only the black nightshade, which gave birth to the sprite worm, remained in a dying state, its magic power intermittently giving the impression that it could die at any time. However, it did not die and was just persevering. There was no change in the smoke mission, which meant that the mission had not been completed. The Black Pearl's magic power should be sufficient. I can see signs of magic power emanating from under the soil. I can't use any more strength. Black Nightshade, little bug, whether or not you can survive depends on your desire to live. For this smoke mission he could only wait for Nightshade to die, the mission would fail, or for Nightshade to come back to life, the mission would be completed. Liszt stood up. He looked in the direction of the castle, where a yellow-gray horse was galloping towards the castle. Marcus is back. He mounted Black Dragon and returned to the castle, just in time to bump into Marcus, who was standing at the gate. "Teacher Marcus, did the trip go smoothly?" "Everything went smoothly, sir. Tomorrow, the crystal craftsman Brad will follow the flower caravan's transport team to the flower town to serve you for a month. It's been hard on you, Teacher Marcus." Liszt nodded. After obtaining a large number of crystals, he came up with the idea of making a telescope. Glass was the most suitable material for making telescopes, but glass production was relatively complicated. For the time being, Liszt did not have the ability to produce glass, so he could only use crystals to make binoculars. It was very simple to make a pair of telescopes out of transparent white crystal. The Coral City had craftsmen who specialized in making crystal ornaments. These craftsmen might not be able to make crystal lamps, but it was absolutely not a problem for them to polish concave and convex mirrors. Are the two lenses of a telescope concave or convex? There were some physics that Liszt had forgotten. He remembered that a monocular consisted of two lenses, which could be lengthened and shortened to different distances. By hiring a crystal craftsman for a month, he should be able to make a good pair of telescopes. The crystal craftsman Brad. He arrived the next day as scheduled. He was a bald middle-aged man with a thick beard. He spoke in a low, muffled voice. "Respected Baron of the Flower Town, Brad sends his regards." "Brad, do you know why I hired you?" "Mr. Marcus said that you want me to make a few crystal products for you." "Yes, help me make a batch of mirrors." Liszt handed him a few pieces of white crystal. White crystal was a mineral associated with white gemstones. As for what kind of dragon produced white gemstones, Liszt did not know. There was a lot of information about dragons, but most of it was vague. Those countries with dragons would always hide their dragons mysteriously. "Is this white crystal? I can feel the magic power contained in it." Brad was a freelance craftsman as well as a trainee knight. He had chi. Craftsmen who made gems and crystals must have chi. Liszt shook out a piece of thick bast paper. "I need you to make these pieces of white crystal into mirrors. The surface must be very smooth, the thickness must be uniform, and the shape must be circular. There are two sizes of mirrors, but the thickness can vary." The structure of convex and concave lenses was drawn on the paper. Liszt could not figure out which focal length of the convex and concave lenses were suitable to be combined into telescopes. He simply had the crystal craftsman make a few more pieces, and when the time came he could combine them one by one to experiment. "As you wish, Sir Baron. Then you will stay in the Flower Town. If you can finish grinding the mirrors ahead of time, you can leave ahead of time. The salary will still be the 1 gold coin promised before." Crystal craftsmen were relatively high-end craftsmen and usually had a good income. It was normal for them to earn 20 to 30 silver coins a month. If Liszt wanted to hire them to work, he had to come up with a higher salary. Chapter 112. The binoculars were still being sharpened. The black nightshade was still half dead. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was still gestating. The fast-growing poisonous thorns of the thorns worm stalk shrubs were still sprouting new seedlings every day. Houses were still being built sporadically in the settlements, as well as in the 4 districts of the small town. The road construction was still ongoing. The castle's Dosen Avenue was still under construction every day. Shooting arrows, practicing spear shooting. Man and horse charging as one. Liszt's life was very fulfilling every day. Mrs. Abby's cooking skills had evolved rapidly. Not only could she make pineapple buns, but she had also learned several new cuisines. The Thorns caravan traveled back and forth to the North Valley City every day to purchase supplies needed by the castle. As long as they had gold coins, they could buy anything they wanted. Silently nourish everything. I have been in this world for almost half a year, yet I have not done anything spectacular, nor have I carried out any bold and decisive construction. However, under my guidance, the Flower Town is still on the path of rapid development. The territory may still be barren, but at least it has a new look. Previously he only had 2 assistants, Gort and Marcus. Now, Gort was the administrative officer, Marcus was the temporary knight captain, Isaiah was the financial officer, Blair was the legal officer, and Karl Hammerstein was the defense officer. Old Grandette was the captain of the Flower Caravan, Harpagon was the vice captain, Sherlock was the captain of the Thorns Caravan, and Costo was the captain of the Flower. He had already formed a team. The sprite worms had grown from 4, tulip sprite worm, corn sprite worm, alfalfa sprite worm and thorn sprite worm, to 7 sprite worms. There were also the tomato sprite worm, wheat sprite worm and peanut sprite worm. There were still 2 sprite worms waiting to give birth, fragrant coconut sprite worm and black nightshade sprite worm. The number of horses in the small town, including the horses of the new officials and their families, had grown from 15 to 7 pregnant maras. 2 more foals and 8 older horses had been bought. There were also 12 carriages allocated to the caravan. There was not enough pasture in the horse farm, so fodder had to be purchased from outside. In addition, potions, smoke grass, fruit-stealing monkeys, seafood, only the population growth was slow. From 1991 to the present 2074, there was only an increase of 83 people. However, at the end of September, 500 serfs would be transported over to replenish the labor force. Actually, the biggest gains are all on me. Liszt leaned back in his chair and leisurely sipped on a cup of milk tea without any additives. Behind him was a fruit tree outside the castle. It was a green apple tree that produced very little fruit and tasted sour. At least it could shed some shade. He was in a good mood. Perhaps Mrs. Morrison's skills had improved, or perhaps the quality of the milk produced by the pregnant cows had improved. Either way, the milk tea was getting better and better. Even after drinking the milk tea, he could feel that the nutrition in the milk tea made his body feel especially comfortable, and even his spirit became excited. It swept away the laziness of the hot summer. Dosen is my good bodyguard. His rock thorns are very powerful, so blessed curls can probably be saved for meat. Space gems are the most priceless treasures. Mithril ores, jades, crystals, and black pearls should be valued in dragon coins. The red blood sword is a gem weapon, and there's also the sun's child floating bottle. His personal wealth, if measured, might already be second to none in Coral Island. I also learned the chi secret skill, Magic Eye. Although I don't know why Vulture Knight Stephen hid magic eyes in a book, but I should thank him. This auxiliary chi secret skill is far better than any powerful chi secret skill. Dosen was running around in joy. Woof woof. Thomas, who was holding the rope behind Dosen, was sweating profusely as he ran. With Dosen's current strength, Thomas, an ordinary person, had no way to hold him back. Liszt moved his gaze away from Dosen. He looked at the small garden next to the castle. A maid was cleaning up the dried meat in the small garden. The black and white maid uniform looked very pleasing to the eye. Is that little Lily? Liszt was a bit far away and could not see the maid's facial expression, but he could judge from her figure. Little Lily, the kitchen maid, was the tallest maid in the castle. She was about 1.7 meters tall. He remembered the first time he saw little Lily. At that time, the 17-year-old girl was still a thin bamboo pole figure. Liszt did not know if it was because of the good food and living in the castle, but now he could see that she had breasts and her buttocks were a bit more perky than before. The girl has grown up. The picture of a busy maid is really pleasing to the eye. After sighing with emotion, he retracted his gaze and began to operate the chi in his body. Just now, there was some restlessness in his body, as if he wanted to express his respect to the maid. His body was also developing rapidly. His height had increased by quite a bit, and he was estimated to be 1.83 meters tall. The Earth Knight Marcus was a standard 1.86 meters tall. Standing next to him, Liszt was not much different. The Count was about 1.81 meters tall. His deceased mother, Melissa, was said to be a tall beauty. Therefore, Liszt inferred that he could probably continue to grow taller. It would not be a problem to surpass Marcus. Perhaps he could eventually reach 1.9 meters? The restlessness was difficult to quell. Liszt simply stood up, pulled out the red blood sword hanging from his waist, and began to practice Fiery Dragon Drill. In a flash it was September. The Count had returned from the Blue Dragon Island and gathered all his followers to go to Tulip Castle for a meeting. As a baron of the Flower Town, Liszt naturally had to go. The Coral Island system was not huge. There were 2 Viscounts, 16 Baron, 82 Lord Knight, 1 Life Viscount, Levis, and several Life Baron. Life Knighthood was a title outside the system. It enjoyed the same treatment as a noble title, but it did not have a territory and was not hereditary. Some countries had it while others did not. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, Life Knighthood was generally granted to the adult heirs of a large family. When they came of age but their father had not yet died, it was not their turn to inherit the title. Some were even in their 40s and had not yet inherited the title, which was a bit embarrassing. As a result, Life Knighthood came into being. Of course, some wizards, craftsmen with contributions, and even wealthy merchants might be conferred the title of Life Knighthood. The Grand Duke has issued an expansion order. In autumn, he will cooperate with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to attack the coast of the Eagle Kingdom. After meeting with Liszt, Levis informed him of the news. Father has decided to accept the expansion order and participate in the war. Are you going as well? Asked Liszt. Of course I have to go. This is a test for me. I need to prove that I can inherit Father's will and be favored by the glory of the night. Levis was not nervous, only excited. The Grand Duke has arranged for Father to cooperate with Marquis Roderick, while I will act as the liaison officer to coordinate the 2 orders of chivalry. Marquis Roderick? Liszt recalled that Madame Penelope had said that Levis was pursuing the other party's daughter. What is the name of the Marquis's daughter? Chapter 113. The surnames of great nobles were always very elegant. They were both Marquis clans, but the Taro family's surname was Long Taro. Compared to the Golden Wheater clan's surname was Golden Wheater, there was a difference in grade. This was also a display of their foundation. A few decades ago the Golden Wheat family's surname was still Golden Wheat. This was a very powerful family. The reason why their surname wasn't Barley, or Wheat, was because their family not only had the Wheat Great Sprite, but also the Barley Great Sprite. Before the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was established, the Golden Wheat family had already relied on grain sales to rise to power. Later they followed the Sapphire family and established a country, becoming the first Marquis family in the Grand Duchy. But just like the small Kerchief clan and the big Kerchief clan, the Golden Wheat clan had also experienced a split several decades ago. The branch that had the Wheat Sprite was conferred the title of Earl due to their military exploits, and they changed their surname to Golden Wheat Grains. The branch that possessed the Great Barley Sprite inherited the title and changed their surname to Golden Barley. Every time the family name changes, it meant the development of the clan, the improvement of the bloodline, and the change of status. If one day I can also nurture a great tulip sprite and rely on my military achievements to be conferred the title of Earl, then, according to the habits of the nobles, perhaps the Tulip family will change their name to Red Tulip, and I will change my name to Black Tulip. Liszt Black Tulip? Sometimes Liszt would indulge in idle fantasies. Then, my dear brother, I wish you all the best. After finding out the name of the Marquis daughter, Liszt smiled and gave his blessings. I will succeed. Unlike cousin Meopel, Loria and I have been corresponding for half a year, and I know she has already noticed me. What I need to do now is to beat the other competitors with an excellent performance. Cousin Meopel, it's purely unrequited love. The princess has many guests. As Levis spoke, he did not forget to make fun of Meopel. How should she put it? Her cousin's character, appearance and family background were all impeccable, but he fell in love with a dissolute princess. Liszt had a good impression of Meopel, so he didn't go along with Levis's teasing. Right, brother, the black pearls I sold you last time, did you forge them into magic equipment? It's a success. The magician carved a special magic rune on it, and then it became a special item that can silence the wind. Silence the wind. The water magic in the black pearl can suppress the flow of wind, especially wind magic. I saw with my own eyes that the wind blade released by the magician dissipate when it was 5 meters away from the black pearl. Although it is a little big, it can be used to defend against sneak attacks from Wind Dochi. He looked at Liszt and continued, especially for a knight like Marcus who has the wind combat aura. He likes to practice archery the most. He wants to use his combat aura to control his bow and arrows to complete a fatal sneak attack. Now, I don't need to be nervous when I meet an elite among the Wind Chi Earth Knight. It seems that the black pearl is very useful. I always feel that I sold it cheaply. 280 gold coins is not a small amount. It can only silence the wind, nothing more. If it could silence all magic, then it would be really valuable. Levis moved closer. Do you still have any black pearls? As far as I know, a pearl oyster can take out several pearls and a giant clam should be the same. You must have some black pearls in your hands. Liszt didn't answer and asked back, it can silence the wind up to 5 meters? Yes. Such an ability made Liszt's mind become active. He sold Levis a bowl-sized black pearl that could cover an area with a radius of 5 meters and silence all wind. If it was replaced with 2 basketball-sized black pearls, how big of an area could it silence? If it was replaced with a wash-basin-sized black pearl, how big of an area could it silence? I'm afraid it would have a radius of tens to hundreds of meters. Such an ability might only be used on the battlefield to avoid sneak attacks from Wind Chi. But if it was used on the sea, think about it. If the flower was equipped with a wash-basin-sized black pearl that could silence the wind around the entire ship, it would be equivalent to not suffering from storms at all. Then sailing on the sea would not be like walking on flat ground. Even if the waves could not be calmed, the wind would still be silenced and the threat would be greatly reduced. In an instant he made a decision. The wash-basin-sized and basketball-sized black pearl must not be sold. This is a necessity to arm my own fleet in the future. So he replied in a casual tone, of course I still have one. I originally intended to keep it as a collection. Black pearls are not a rare treasure that can be obtained easily. Sell me another one. You want another one? Yes, I intend to make it into a new magic equipment and then give it to Rolia. What do you think? Isn't it very thoughtful and sincere? Liszt said casually, women usually have no resistance to jewelry. I think it's a good idea. How many gold coins are you going to pay for it? I still have a black pearl of the same size as the one I sold you, as well as a few smaller black pearls. 280 gold coins. This was the price of the previous black pearl, and Levis shouted the same price. Silencing all wind, with such an effect, 280 gold coins can't be bought. Liszt said unhurriedly. Now it was the seller's market. It was time to raise the price. After a long talk. In the end, Liszt sold another black pearl for 430 gold coins. Liszt, your heart is black just like those merchants. It doesn't matter whether my heart is black or not. What matters is that you can let Rolia see your red heart, isn't it? At the luncheon, the Count made an announcement about the expansion order. Then he began to call for followers to follow him into battle. This was nothing new. Every year or two an expansion order would be issued. Therefore in one afternoon all his followers were called. The Count himself dispatched the most elite Coral Island orders of chivalry, a total of 10 knight squads, a total of 130 people, as well as a temporarily formed garrison orders of chivalry, a total of 15 knight squads, a total of 195 people. His followers dispatched a total of 26 elite or ordinary knight squads, a total of 342 people. Altogether, 667 knight squads were mixed into 4 orders of chivalry. The Count himself led the elite Coral Island orders of chivalry, while Levis served as the liaison officer. He led a mixed orders of chivalry, Viscount Trick Wildgrass led a mixed orders of chivalry, and Viscount Jonas Gravel led the last one. Rest for 3 days. After 3 days, all knight are to gather in Coral City and set out for Golden Island by ship. We will act together with Marquis Roderick's orders of chivalry. The Count, dressed in military attire and holding his sword, spoke in a powerful and resonant voice. All the aristocrats participating in the war. Covering their left chests with one hand, they performed a knight salute. Follow, sir. Chapter 114. The Count was very busy. Liszt just took a break to greet him and give his blessings. Liszt then left Tulip Castle and returned to Flower Town. Before leaving, the Count said solemnly, Flower Town is developing very well. I am paying attention to the training of your knight squad. I hope that you and Levis can fight side by side in next year's expedition. I'm also looking forward to it. Liszt responded. In his heart he could not deny it. In terms of war, it was impossible to fight a war, it was impossible to fight a war in this life. He didn't know how to flatter people. He could only maintain his current lifestyle by farming. However, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. He would not stay in Flower Town all his life and be a country baron. Riding a dragon was a big goal in life and owning an island was a small goal. To have an island as a fief, one had to at least be a viscount, which required some effort. On the way back, Black Dragon galloped. He was slightly distracted on horseback. The excitement of the aristocrats at the expedition banquet infected him. The aristocrats might be a group of parasites, but their desire for glory was very pure. He wanted to fight, he wanted to charge, he wanted to stake his life for riches and honor. Am I really not going to the battlefield? If I don't go to the battlefield, how can I promote my title? Was it a rebellion? Without the strength to slay a dragon, rebellion is tantamount to courting death. The Sapphire family's sapphire dragon could not be treated as a decoration. That was the world's top power, equivalent to nuclear weapons. It was best not to test it. Going to the battlefield to grab credit is the most effective way to promote. The Lord does not need to take the lead in the charge. Let the knight fight and kill, it can still guarantee my safety. At worst, I will be captured and let others redeem me. It will be a bit shameful, but it is most important to keep my life. Maybe I can take the route of an ordinary aristocratic second son and win over an aristocratic lady? Some aristocrats only had daughters. Their titles would be inherited by their daughters. The Grand Duchy recognized female knights. Such an aristocratic lady was the best marriage partner for an aristocratic second son. Some aristocratic ladies, favored by their parents, would get a fief and become a hereditary aristocrat, such as Lavera. She would also be the best marriage partner for the second son of a noble. It's a pity that in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, there are only a few suitable noble ladies. There are many noble ladies at the level of lord, knight, and baron. Noble ladies at the level of viscount and countess are extremely rare. The archipelago is not very big to begin with. There are only 7 marquises and more than 20 earls. Moreover, there was another very real problem. The aristocratic ladies desired the higher-ranking aristocratic young masters, not ordinary small aristocrats. I'm very handsome. My father is an earl, my grandfather is a marquis, and I myself am a baron. Among the second sons of the nobles, I'm probably an extremely competitive existence. Let me think carefully, those single noble ladies in the Grand Duchy who are suitable for marriage? After thinking for a while, he actually couldn't think of a single one. All the nobles hoped to have a son to inherit their title. There were very few nobles who only had one daughter. The battlefield was too dangerous and there were too few female knights. Liszt thought of a third way to obtain a title, by making a great contribution. If he offered his paper-making technique to the Sapphire Grand Duke, he might be able to obtain the title of Count, or even Marquis. However, the titles conferred on the basis of contribution are all life titles without fiefdoms. This method is not advisable at all. After thinking it over, he still couldn't come up with a good solution. He smiled self-deprecatingly and inwardly sighed. Instead of going through so much trouble, it would be better to look forward to the Count and Levis. Hold on, I feel that this idea shouldn't appear. After all, they are blood relatives. After returning to the flower town, Liszt once again fell into a leisurely pace of life. The Count was in a hurry to participate in the war. He couldn't even hold his birthday on the Coral Island on September 14th. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about diplomacy and could develop the town with peace of mind. The Black Nightshade was still half dead, but as long as it wasn't dead, it meant that the sprite worm still had the desire to live. There was still hope. What brought him joy was the fragrant coconut tree. The fruit farmer Jiggs came to report that the fragrant coconut had split open. Instead of coconut milk, a milky white, plump sprite worm crawled out. He brought the jade powder and the jade box. Liszt rushed to the oyster settlement, climbed the several tens of meters tall fragrant coconut tree, and saw the long-awaited fragrant coconut tree sprite worm. It was very fat, fatter than all the sprite worms he had on hand. Its body was also particularly white, as if it was faintly glowing. It looked as if it had just taken a milk bath. Little fellow, come, I'll treat you to some jade powder. He sprinkled the jade powder on the fragrant coconut to lure the sprite worm. The newborn sprite worm, relying on its instincts, was quickly attracted by the magic power contained in the jade powder. It began to swallow the jade powder in large mouthfuls. Next, Liszt simply smeared the jade powder on his finger and extended it to the sprite worm's mouth. He bit down. The contract was completed. The pleasant feeling of telepathy made him and the fragrant coconut tree sprite worm closely linked, sharing joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. After putting the fragrant coconut sprite worm into the jade box, Liszt rewarded each of the fruit farmers who had been patiently looking after the fragrant coconut sprite worm with a silver coin. Jiggs, you still have to carefully look after the worm's stock, understand? Understood, Sir Lord. After returning to the castle, the fragrant coconut sprite worm was handed over to Carter to be stored in the worm house. Carter was very happy, but at the same time he expressed his concern. Master, we already have 8 sprite worms. I am afraid that the castle servants will not be able to meticulously look after every worm stock. Do you need to hire new servants to specifically look after the worm stalks? This question reminded Liszt. Of course, no one in the flower town dared to disobey him, let alone destroy his worm stalks. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if a commoner went crazy and cut down the worm stalk? Or what if a beast accidentally ate the worm stalk? Don't expect the fence to stop everything. Your concern is very reasonable. However, I do not intend to hire servants to look after the worm stalks. I intend to set up a regular team to look after the worm stalks. He immediately called Gort, Marcus, and Karl Hammerstein. Sir. Teacher Gort, Teacher Marcus, Karl, I called you here because I have more and more sprite worms. The worm stalks are scattered all over the fief, they need better protection. Sir, do you need more people from the patrol team to frequently patrol the worm stalks? Just patrolling is not enough. I need to focus on protecting them for a long time. Do you have any good ideas? Liszt had an idea, but he did not reveal it. Holding back and not revealing, this was the way of the superior to control his subordinates. Gort thought for a moment, then said, At present, the worm stalks are mainly protected by the castle's serving men, the surveillance of the local farmers, the patrol team, as well as the fence's isolation. Perhaps we can train more patrol team members to specifically patrol the worm stalks. Marcus was even more straightforward. We can leave it to the night squad to patrol. Karl finally said, Sir, I think that we can arrange for patrol team members to specifically keep watch around the worm stalks. At present, we have 20 patrol team members. We do not need so many to patrol the fief. By dividing 8 patrol team members to keep watch over the worm stalks can be protected at all times. Carl's proposal is more in line with my idea. However, there is no need for patrol team members to keep watch, that would be a waste of manpower. Select strong serfs from each settlement and arrange for them to guard the worm stalks in shifts. The fief's administrative office will pay them a copper coin a day. Chapter 115. Rome had been very excited recently. He thought that, like Odin and Gray, he would not be able to cultivate chi and would eventually be abandoned by Mr. Marcus. The consequences of being abandoned and becoming a good-for-nothing without chi were very frightening. He, Carl, Odin, and Gray were all serfs and were hired as Baron List's retainer knight. But now, Carl had become a trainee knight, the Flower Town's defense officer, and had a patrol team of 20 people under his command. When he saw Carl, he had to call him Mr. Carl. The change in his status put great pressure on him. There was a suffocating sense of urgency, as if the giant hand of fate was clutching his throat, trying to strangle his hope of progress. He was afraid that he would really achieve nothing. Therefore, not only did he earnestly practice cultivation when Marcus was teaching, but he also practiced in private regardless of everything else. Finally, he successfully cultivated chi, low-level chi, and became a trainee knight. His wish was fulfilled, and his hard work reaped the fruits of his hard work. The Sir Lord appointed him as the captain of the patrol team to assist Carl and be responsible for the fief's public security. Although his status was not as good as that of Carl, but Rome was already very satisfied. His talent was not as outstanding as that of Carl, and he cultivated chi many days later than Carl. Therefore he should be placed under Carl. The patrol team originally had a captain, but the captain was just an ordinary person who was not convinced by Rome's arrival. However, Rome easily taught the other party how to behave with a few punches. Strength, with just low-level chi. I already have strength that ordinary people can only look at in the dust. How powerful will an Earth Knight with mid-level chi be? Before he had obtained chi, he did not have a very intuitive understanding of Knight. He only knew that Knights were very strong, but how strong they were and how marvelous their chi was, he had no way of knowing. Now that he had chi, he finally fully understood the tremendous qualitative change that chi brought to a Knight. Earth Knight. I have no hope of obtaining mid-level chi in this lifetime. However, Sir Lord has given me a chance to change my fate, and I, Rum Wine Song, will seize it. From today onwards, I will definitely let my son start cultivating Do Chi from a young age. He was not married yet, but there were already many girls in the town who had expressed their love for him. A trainee knight was still very popular. My son will become an Earth Knight like Mr. Marcus. At that time he would have the hope of climbing up to the nobility. For a better tomorrow. Luomu did his job conscientiously every day and never slacked off in his patrol work. As the patrol leader he was especially satisfied. However, what Ram did not know was that List had already noticed his conscientiousness. List was not a fan of mundane tasks. It was not his style to worry about the daily lives of the people in the small town. He did not want to be a Han Xin who was good at commanding soldiers, but a Liu Bang who was good at commanding generals. Therefore he admired subordinates who worked hard. Ram was a subordinate who worked hard. Ram, based on your performance, I have a new mission for you. Sir, please instruct me. You and Carl have both become trainee knight and can take charge on your own. Therefore, I intend to set up the position of insect officer in the Flower Town and set up an insect protection team. The team members will be drawn from the strong labor force of the various settlements. As for you, you will serve as the insect officer. What you need to do is to lead the insect protection team and protect the worm stalks. After thinking about it, List decided to set up a separate insect protection team. The basic model of this team was roughly equivalent to a militia organization and could be regarded as a supplement to the patrol team. In the future, more and more people would pour into the Flower Town. The patrol team alone would not be able to maintain law and order. The insect protection team was part of the security force. Patrol team, police station. Insect protection team, militia battalion. Night team, army. It was roughly this line of thought. As the successor of the doctrine of bringing, List's thoughts would always be set up in this way. Ram immediately knelt on one knee and performed a knight's salute. Ram is willing to follow in Sir's footsteps for life. His body trembled slightly. This was caused by excitement. He never thought that opportunities to change his fate would come one after another. Now he had officially entered the ranks of officials. Officials were not a class in the formal sense. However, to be able to serve as an official meant that one had already entered the ranks of aristocratic reserve service. When he left the castle, he was still in a bit of a trance, his body seemingly floating. Serving sir is a moment in my life when I, am deeply favored by the glory of a knight. Perhaps it was because he felt List's sincere concern for the sprite worm. Less than 2 days after the establishment of the insect protection team, he saw that the leaves of the black nightshade worm stalk in the black nightshade field had regained a trace of vitality. The originally covered black spots had also dissipated quite a bit. So you made it? List hurriedly summoned the long-awaited smoke mission. Unsurprisingly, the smoke serpentines had already changed. Mission completed. Reward, a black nightshade sprite worm. Sure enough, the black nightshade breeds a sprite worm. This is my 9th sprite worm. Very good. Although I don't know what the black nightshade is used for. The black nightshade berries could be eaten but only as a snack. Even with the black nightshade worm, it could not bear many berries. It was better than nothing. At least it was a sprite worm. The smoke distorted and issued a new mission. The late heavy rain is about to visit the flower town. Most of the fief's residents' houses have been in disrepair for many years and cannot withstand the scouring of the heavy rain. As the Lord, how can you sit idly by and do nothing? Please repair the fief's houses. Reward, a variant type of thorns. Another variant type of thorns? List mused, this is already the 3rd mission related to thorns. It seems that it must be a chain mission. The previous invisible dragon chain mission rewarded a space gem. What good things will be rewarded for this time's chain mission? He had a vague guess, a thorn's lesser sprite. Will it be a thorn's lesser sprite? Although he could not guarantee it, List firmly suppressed the idea. He would not be disappointed if he did not hold out hope. Once he really obtained it, it would be a huge surprise. For now, he just had to do his best to complete the mission. Repair the houses. It seems that it is time for another national war. List immediately summoned all the fief's officials and arranged for the repair of the fief's houses. There was almost no rain this summer, which is not common sense. I speculate that there may be a strong rainstorm in the next few days. Most of the houses in the flower town are old wooden houses, which are very unsafe. The new houses are already under construction. As for the serfs, they can be sent to repair their own wooden houses. Gord inevitably looked down on the serfs. Blair was suspected of flattering him. The castle should be repaired the most. The place where Sir lives should be safer and more beautiful. As for the castle's repair work, let's talk about it after the autumn harvest is over and the labor force is idle. Now each of you will be assigned your tasks. Make sure that every damaged wooden house is properly reinforced. All civilians, whether serfs or freedmen, must accept the work arrangements. After a pause, List said, all civilians are not paid. They must work for free to repair their own wooden houses. However, the materials for the repair of the wooden houses will be paid by the castle. This is a benefit I give to my subjects. Chapter 116. Clop clop clop. The sound of horse hooves rolled over the gravel road. Black Dragon held its head high, its black mane fluttering in the wind. This main road had been under construction for more than 2 months. Every day, 180 civilian workers were maintained, each of whom was paid 1 copper coin a day. In other words, this road cost 180 copper coins a day. In 2 months, a total of more than 10,000 copper coins or about 1 gold coin had been spent. Sometimes, manpower was so cheap that it made people sigh. The stones transported from various places were crushed into fingernail-sized gravel and spread on the ground. The gravel mixed with the sand of the East Coast made the entire road look very clean and tidy. Without cement, gravel and sand would unknowingly fall into one's shoes when stepped on it. Unfortunately, the Thorns Ridge is just a rocky mound. The stones are also very small, unable to even cut through flagstones. Otherwise, it would have been more beautiful to build the main road into a flagstone road. List felt a bit regretful. The town was too barren, and the surrounding resources were also extremely scarce. He had sold the black pearls twice, and his purse was bulging with more than 500 gold coins. However, it could not be immediately converted into resources. Livestock could not be bought, pasture was scarce. Buildings could not be built, manpower was insufficient. Roads could not be repaired frequently, stone was insufficient. Uncultivated fields could not be planted, tools were scarce. Just like today, the whole town began to repair the wooden houses. There were no workers working on the road. Under the supervision of patrols and clerks, the commoners began to check whether their wooden houses were sturdy. Cracked beams had to be reported for replacement, damaged roofs had to be reported for repair, loosened windows had to be reported for reinforcement, and decayed corners had to be reported for repair. The The commoners were very enthusiastic. This was because the Sir Lord would provide the repair materials. This made the commoners feel that they had taken advantage of the situation. If they did not report it, they would suffer a great loss. Perhaps I should start baking bricks. There is not enough stone, so I can make up for it with bricks. Liszt thought as he watched the vigorous renovation of the wooden houses. Stonemasons and carpenters were the construction workers of the other world. Commoners lived in wooden houses, while aristocrats lived in stone castles. In the flower town, only Liszt's castle was built from stone and used glutinous rice as a gel material. The value of glutinous rice was very high. The sprites bred by glutinous rice were called wall sprites. Its value did not lie in its edible properties, but in its strong binding properties. Without cement, the solidification of the wall was either made of clay or glutinous rice. Fortunately, the Tulip family had a glutinous rice sprite, so the castle that the Earl built was extravagantly made of glutinous rice. Such a castle was many times stronger than a castle made of mud, and it could be built very high. For example, Liszt's castle. After removing the steeple-shaped roof, it was possible to add a few more floors. There's almost no technical content in the firing of bricks. As long as we find clay suitable for firing bricks, we'll be able to fire qualified bricks. However, to fire bricks, we'll need to build a brick kiln and we'll need coal. If we don't have coal, we'll at least need charcoal. Without experimenting, I'm afraid we won't be able to produce qualified bricks. Liszt, who liked to read and ponder over things when he had nothing to do, was quite knowledgeable. He knew how to make ice with saltpeter, clay bricks, handmade paper, black gunpowder formula, indigenous cement, distilled liquor, pancreas formula, binoculars, fired glass, and when the black gunpowder was successfully mixed, he could even make hand grenades. In addition, the water wheel, the plow, the windmill, after tinkering with it, he could also explain the general principle. However, it wasn't easy to turn knowledge into tangible objects. The biggest constraints were materials and labor. Making ice with saltpeter required saltpeter. If he didn't find a small saltpeter mine, making ice would be an empty slogan. Firing glass was the same, which required quartz sand and soda ash. Quartz sand probably required a quartz vein, which he remembered was the kind of stone that looked a little transparent. But what was soda ash? Was it soda? He remembered that when he made porridge he needed to add some soda. There might be a small amount of soda ash in plant ash, but where could he get soda ash for firing glass? In addition to saltpeter, black gunpowder also needed sulfur. Limestone was needed for cement. Strictly speaking, I don't seem to know what sulfur and limestone look like, right? Liszt suddenly thought of a very serious problem. He only knew that saltpeter could be used to make ice, quartz could be used to fire glass, limestone could be used to make cement, and sulfur could be used to make explosives. But what did limestone and sulfur look like? Previously he only knew that saltpeter was white. Many books mentioned that it grew in toilets and corners. Later, after the smoke mission indicated that there was a small saltpeter mine, he successfully discovered saltpeter. If he really had to look for a saltpeter mine by himself, he might not be able to find it. Limestone is a rather vulgar name. It is probably a common stone. Does it have anything to do with marble or granite? As for sulfur, I have to look for it in volcanic craters. It is said that volcanic craters have the smell of sulfur. At this moment, Liszt felt that his real self was far more ignorant than he imagined. This is a bit awkward, but I definitely know where to find the soil for firing bricks. In theory, firing bricks required clay, the kind of soil that could be fired into red bricks. However, if one did not pursue high quality, then most of the soil could be used to fire bricks. Soil that was a bit sticky was considered a good material. There was still a lot of such soil in the flower town. When the mission is completed, I will gather a group of serfs to fire bricks for me. I want to build houses with bricks. Build flame mushroom greenhouses, build toilets, build pig, horse, cow and sheep pens, build factories. Then build a football field, a basketball court, and raise a group of professional players to come and play games. I still have to spend time looking for quartz, limestone and soda ash. Cement and glass have a wide range of uses. Then he suddenly thought, in fact, I am an aristocrat. Enjoying life is what I should do. Why do I think about inventions and research all day long? He used to be a liberal arts student. He was not a science student. He studied information management at university. Life is so wonderful, I don't want to be a wizard. Just as he was riding his horse, his thoughts flying. Not far away on the side of the street, a wooden house collapsed with a thump. Liszt raised his hand to block the sunlight and looked over. A group of people were watching the commotion in a mess. He ordered a retainer knight, What happened? Go and ask. The retainer knight quickly brought over a member of the patrol who was supervising the scene. The patrol member knelt on the ground and answered List's question. Sir Lord, it was Hunter with the loud voice who tore down his wooden house. Tore down his own wooden house? Yes, we saw with our own eyes that Hunter was hitting his own wooden house with a stick, breaking a few supporting pillars. After that, the wooden house collapsed and Hunter was buried in it. However, he was not killed, only one of his arms was broken. Why did he tear down his wooden house? Chapter 117. Audacious Unruly Commoner. After listening to the patrol member's report, this thought flashed through List's mind. This was simply a scam against the Lord. They even wanted to take advantage of the Lord. However, he did not listen to the patrol member's side of the story. Sean, go and ask Hunter if he tore down his own cabin. Yes, sir. The retainer knight Sean quickly returned. At the same time, Gord also hurried over. The result was certain. When Hunter heard that the castle would pay for the repair of the cabin, he threatened to replace every piece of wood in his cabin on the spot. Then, extreme joy turned to sorrow and the cabin collapsed. Teacher Gort, how do you think we should deal with this? List didn't show any indignation on his face. He just asked indifferently. Abominable commoner, he should be beaten to death. Gort replied in a loud voice, Sir, the free commoner Hunter is greedy. He even dares to covet the castle's sacred and inviolable things. He should be severely punished. I think that he should be demoted to a serf and whipped 100 times. There were many civilians in the surroundings. When they heard Gort's voice, they couldn't help but shrink back. Being demoted to a serf was not terrible. But being whipped 100 times was enough to beat someone to death. In particular, there were a few civilians who had tampered with their own cabin, wanting to take advantage of it. When they heard this, their legs almost began to tremble. The greed in their hearts subsided in an instant. They groped and quietly moved towards their home, ready to stuff the tampered wood back in. To be honest, 100 lashes was a bit heavy. The crime was not worthy of death. However, Hunter's behavior made List quite unhappy. He had worked hard to lead the flower town to prosperity, yet some people did not know how to be grateful and still wanted to take advantage of it. This kind of practice must not be allowed to grow, it must be stifled. For the sake of the fact that one of his arms has already been smashed, the whipping will be remembered for the time being. After he recovers, split it into 2 batches of 50 lashes each. He glanced at the nervous civilians in the surroundings and told Gort, do a good job of spreading the word. I don't want to find a second person doing something similar. As you wish, sir. A cruel smile appeared on Gort's face. I will let these foolish commoners know whether a few pieces of wood or their own lives are more important. After the commotion, List was no longer in the mood to continue patrolling the wooden hut repair battle. He turned his horse around and returned to the castle. The black nightshade cordyceps in the black nightshade field were gradually recovering, and the magic power in them could already flow stably. The black spots and withered leaves gradually turned green again. After looking at the nightshade, List rode his horse around the stud farm. Finally, he returned to the shade of the green apple tree. Carter, who had just come out of the cellar with a bunch of keys, walked over. His pace was very slow, and he had the calmness of an old man. His clothes were always meticulous. They were a little shabby, but they were ironed very neatly without any loose threads or wrinkles. Master, you don't seem to be in a good mood. Looks like my mood is written all over my face. Is there anything I can do for you? Carter asked with a smile. His smile was very amiable, making people feel warm immediately. List motioned for Thomas to bring a stool for Carter, and then said, Mr. Carter, do you think I am a qualified lord? I have never doubted it. You have the courage of the tulip family and the compassion, justice, humility, and honor of aristocrats. You have always been looked after by the glory of the night. Has the flower town changed in the past 6 months? It has changed a lot. I remember that when I first came to the flower town, the expressions on the faces of the small town's residents were numb. Now it is as if they have obtained a new life. I see a lot of smiling faces, more smiling faces than I have seen anywhere else. Everyone is grateful for your kindness, master. Not everyone. List picked up the iced fruit juice and took a sip. The coolness spread from his throat to his stomach and then to his whole body. Today I met a commoner who wanted the castle to build a new house for him for free. He tore down his old wooden house without the slightest consideration for my kindness. You are not worth getting angry over such a commoner. Humble commoners are different from noble aristocrats, they are always full of all kinds of vices. All right, I accept your statement. Liszt put away the unhappiness in his heart. In fact, Teacher Gort's whip has already calmed my anger. Perhaps he himself hadn't realized it. He had been thinking more and more from the standpoint of an aristocrat. As a transmigrator, Liszt still couldn't defy the heavens and change this great era. He gradually integrated into it, betraying the communist position and falling to the standpoint of the exploiting class. He was not far from becoming a qualified native. But he had his own words to refute. My dream is to ride a dragon, not to change the world. The great battle to repair the wooden house lasted for 5 days. It couldn't continue because on this day, the north wind howled and dark clouds covered the sky. The alfalfa on the horse field swayed with the wind, unable to straighten up for even a moment. The castle servants were busy installing the wooden planks on the windows to shelter them from the wind and rain. If he had money, Liszt could carve glass out of crystals and install them on the windows just like in Tulip Castle. But he wasn't so extravagant. That box of crystals was reserved for the future to create magic items. For the time being, the castle's windows relied on removable wooden planks to shelter them. In addition, every window had a curtain woven from straw, which could be used to shelter them from the sun and mosquitoes. Not now, the wind outside would blow the curtain apart. After the wooden planks were installed, the castle's originally not very bright light became even dimmer. Carter hurriedly asked the servants to light candles in the study, living room and other rooms, so that the room could regain light. Now that Liszt had enough money, he could light more candles, and there were 5 or 6 in the study. Mr. Carter, don't worry about wastage, my room needs to be bright enough. Reading in dim light is very harmful to the eyes. Liszt held a novel in his hands and flipped through it in boredom. He had already read all of the castle's 182 books more than twice. Basically, a book had tens of thousands of words at most and only a few thousand words at least. He admired the authors who wrote night novels. In just a few thousand words they had to write a complete story with twists and turns. Moreover, there had to be dragons, princesses, orders of chivalry, kings, wars, banquets. Otherwise, no aristocrats would buy their books. If aristocrats did not buy books, then these destitute minor aristocrats who wrote all kinds of fabricated stories would starve to death. There was no doubt that those who chose to write were basically destitute aristocrats. Commoners could not write at all. Master, looking at the current weather, there will be a heavy rain today. The next heavy rain is also good. The flower town's several ponds are about to dry up and are in urgent need of rainwater to replenish them. I hope it won't ruin the crops and affect this season's taxes. Carter lifted a wooden plank and looked at the gloomy sky outside, saying worriedly, "Don't be nervous. There is no shortage of food in the castle and the town. The east coast is the flower town's dining hall," Liszt said faintly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes not focused on the night novel in front of him. Chapter 118. The storm was fierce. When the flower town was swayed by the strong wind, sand and dust filled the sky. For a moment, the whole world suddenly became quiet. Then, bean-sized raindrops pattered on the top of the castle steeple, as if a basin of water had been poured down, splashing everywhere. In the kennel, Dawson's loud barking came. In a room downstairs, Blessed Curls was also quack, quack. Outside the castle and inside the castle were 2 different worlds. Listening attentively, Liszt could hear the servants chatting in the kitchen and dining room downstairs. Due to the heavy rain, there was nothing to do, so they could only chat. Mr. Carter's footsteps lingered upstairs and downstairs. He was always wandering around, inspecting every part of the castle. Mrs. Morrison, who was inspecting the maids' cleaning, met with Carter. They seemed to chat for a while, evaluating the performance of the serving men and maidservants. The 2 stewards were conscientious and conscientious. The 15 servants did not always get along so well. Thomas's attitude towards the serving men was very bad. However, he was Liszt's valet and had a very high status, so no one dared to say anything. Not only did he often find fault with the serving men, but from time to time he also made some sarcastic remarks. Sometimes he was not so respectful towards Carter. Carter could not figure out why Liszt would tolerate such a bad Thomas. Thomas destroyed the harmonious atmosphere of the castle's servants. He could only say, Carter and Liszt had different identities, so they looked at things from different angles. Carter tried to make the castle full of harmony and love. But Liszt did not want this to be the case. If the servants were united, he, as the master, would feel uncomfortable. Imagine a servant making a mistake, and because they had a good relationship, all the servants helped to cover it up. Wouldn't it be possible to fool Liszt? Without Thomas as a troublemaker, the servants would become more and more indulgent. With Thomas keeping an eye on them and finding fault with them at any time, the servants would work in fear. Those in a higher position would always place a few confidants in their subordinate organizations. Even the school teachers knew that they had to cultivate a few students who were good at snitching. He did not choose to eavesdrop on the servants' conversation. List's expression was slightly serious. His thoughts drifted. In this world there are actually such things as ghosts? When the predecessor was young, the bedtime stories that were passed down by word of mouth mentioned ghosts. Legend has it that after a person dies, their soul will leave their body and exist. They have no consciousness and only wander aimlessly. Almost no one had ever seen a ghost. He searched all the memories of his predecessor, but he had not heard of anyone encountering a specter on Coral Island. Of the 100 or so night novels that he had read recently, there were a few that mentioned ghosts, but most of them were just like vampires, werewolves, and zombies in the mines. They were relatively unpopular and rarely appeared. In the past, when he saw it, he would just laugh it off, not taking it seriously. The reason why he thought of ghosts again was that the smoke mission reminded him of ghosts. Mission, an old and dilapidated shipwreck. Exposed to the wind and sun, fishermen who pass by the shipwreck often feel a chill on their backs. It seems that there is something in the shipwreck staring at them, making them not dare to approach. Please find out the reason. Reward, a broken bone. List did not let anyone chop the shipwreck with the 5 treasure chests and burn it for firewood. He felt that the shipwreck could barely be regarded as a tourist attraction, so he placed it in the oyster settlement to add to the oyster settlement's historical heritage. He was also planning to have the shipwreck properly maintained when he had time. He did not expect that the shipwreck would actually hide a secret. What is in the shipwreck? Previously, when the patrol team was looking for the treasure, they had already searched the entire ship inside and out. Apart from some cloth, grain residue and 5 treasure chests, there was nothing else. Or perhaps there was something, but it was not easy to see? He could easily associate it with ghosts, dirty things, shipwrecks, ghost ships, and finally with the legendary specter. Bang bang. A bright light flashed outside the castle, followed by the rumbling of thunder. The wind blew again, accompanied by the pitter-patter of raindrops, isolating the castle from everything outside. Walking to the window, he put down a wooden block and looked at the curtain of rain outside. List felt a sense of desolation, as if he was isolated from the world. Loneliness welled up in his heart, and he suddenly realized that he had been here for half a year. From the world of technological civilization, he had entered the world of magic and qi. It was hard to say whether it was good or bad. In his hometown, the standard of living was a bit higher, but he was just a bitter overtime dog. Here, the standard of living was relatively poor, but he was an aristocrat with supreme power. He also had qi to strengthen his body and was immune to all kinds of diseases. In comparison, I prefer my current life. I like the picture of a maid busying herself in front of me. There was a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. He was not too conflicted. Soon his thoughts returned to the smoke mission. If there is really a ghost in the shipwreck, then it must be eradicated as soon as possible so as not to endanger the lives of the fishermen. The mission reward is a broken bone, but does it have anything to do with the ghost? He wanted to go to the shipwreck, find out the reason, and complete the mission. But the rain was too heavy outside and it was difficult to travel. He could only stay in the castle and wait in boredom. However, he waited. 3 days. The heavy rain flooded the entire town. Fortunately, the town-wide wooden houses had been repaired in advance. The patrols braving the rain had yet to find any collapsed wooden houses. The worm stalks were also safe. Even the most fragile black nightshade worm stalk was still intact because of the protection. But after 3 days of heavy rain, 2 people died. An old serf went out to pick vegetables, accidentally slipped, and never got up again. Another mother of 3 went to the beach in the rain to pick up shells, but after returning she fell seriously ill and died. Picking up shells on the beach? List listened to Gort's report and his heart stirred. Could it be related to the shipwreck? He immediately asked, "Teacher Gort, the woman who died of illness, has the body been examined? Is there anything wrong?" "Examine the body? Sorry, sir, I did not examine the body. I thought it was just a serf who died of illness. This kind of thing, it happens very often." Perhaps List was too sensitive. But he still decided to examine the body of the woman who died of illness in person. Teacher Gort, be sensitive. Recently there have been fishermen who have responded that there is something wrong with the shipwreck, as if there is something dirty on it. I suspect that the woman's death may be related to the shipwreck. Shipwreck? Gort was puzzled. He had not heard of such news at all, but when List mentioned it, he had to pay attention to it. He believed that List had a lot of eyes in Flower Town, and nothing could escape List's attention. "Sir, I will go arrange it. Do you want to examine the body together? Chapter 119. The majestic group of people trampled on the puddles on horseback. The retainer knight and valet surrounded Liszt, while Gort, Marcus and other officials followed closely behind. Compared to the previous time when there were only 2 or 3 people, the current ostentatious scene was very imposing. In fact, there was no need for so many people to follow in the fief. However, Liszt still did it. He liked this kind of aristocratic behavior. Compared to the Count and even his brother Levis, who had a night squad following them when they went out, his team was not big enough and had to work hard to develop. It would be best if he could also bring Dosen and Blessed Curls, with the yellow on the left and the blue on the right. Sir, the roads of the Flower Town are better than those of the Coral City. Isaiah exclaimed in admiration. Every time it rains in the Coral City, it feels like a city of excrement. The excrement floating on the streets is disgusting. Here there is no excrement, not even silt. The main road was a gravel road, which basically had no silt. The road between the settlements was a sea sand road which would have silt but not much. Gort laughed and complimented in a timely manner. Without Sir's wisdom, there would not be such a wonderful environment as the Flower Town. Before, I couldn't understand the benefits of building roads, but little by little they were revealed to me. I hope that in the future, every road will be built as a gravel road. Liszt smiled. He didn't show any complacent expression. This was nothing. Later on, when he made cement, there would be more surprises. The sky had yet to completely clear up and there was still a drizzle. He was wearing a wide black cloak and riding a pure black dragon. At first glance he looked very gloomy. Were it not for his handsome face and the few strands of light blonde hair on his forehead, adding to his liveliness, he could probably impersonate the ringwraith of the Lord of the Rings. After a while, the group had arrived at the Barley settlement. The woman who died of illness was a serf of the Barley settlement. The corpse was still placed in the house. According to the funeral custom of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, after death, people were buried directly in the ground. However, it had been raining heavily for the past few days, so there was no way to bury the corpses. Of the woman's 3 children, 2 were already adults. Under the leadership of their dull father, they knelt on the ground to welcome Liszt's arrival. Naturally, the retainer would explain the purpose of the visit. Liszt only needed to walk to the corpse and examine it. Marcus and Gort checked the corpse first, but they didn't find anything wrong with it. Then Liszt personally inspected it. This was his first time facing a dead person. He was a little nervous, but he controlled himself well and did not show any emotion. Observing with the naked eye, he did not see anything wrong with the corpse, but when he cast magic eyes he found that there was nothing wrong with it. There was a flash of black magic on the corpse. When he took a closer look, the black magic disappeared again. Liszt chose to believe his eyes. He observed quietly, and about a minute later, another wisp of black magic flickered in the corpse and disappeared. "Sir, did you observe anything?" Marcus asked. "There is something wrong with the corpse. I felt signs of magic on the corpse. She did not die of a normal disease but was infected with something dirty." Gort was surprised. "Is there really something dirty? What could it be? If it was infected from the shipwreck, could it be a ghost? Legend has it that there are ghost ships on the sea. The shipwreck we found is not a ghost ship, right? Yes or no, we will know after checking it. By the way, how do you think we should deal with this corpse? To be on the safe side, we should burn it." There was no concept of, the dead is the most important here, and there was no such thing as ancestor worship. After people died, they were basically simply buried, especially civilians. When they died, they would roll up a straw mat, dig a deep pit and bury them, and then there would be nothing else to do. Even some civilians were not willing to dig a pit at all, and it was possible to directly throw the bodies of their relatives into the mountains or into the water. Therefore, when Gort proposed to burn the corpse, the wooden husband of the dead woman did not have any objection. On the contrary, he was somewhat excited. Because Liszt had Gort give him 10 silver coins as compensation. The dirty things brought by the shipwreck caused the death of the woman. In the final analysis, it was Liszt himself who did not allow others to dispose of the shipwreck. Although he was the Lord and would not be punished, 10 silver coins was also a comfort to his conscience. After a moment, a fire. The corpse was burned to ashes in the flames. Looking at the residue after burning and finding no traces of black magic, Liszt breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that even dirty things could be burned clean by fire. After disposing of the corpse, the group quickly rushed to the oyster settlement and arrived near the shipwreck. Before Liszt could approach, Marcus stopped him. "Sir, the shipwreck is dangerous, you should avoid it. Leave it to us to inspect." Gort replied righteously, "That's right, my lord. You shouldn't put yourself in danger. Mr. Marcus is an elite Earth Knight, he will definitely be able to deal with the shipwreck." While speaking, he stood beside List, without the slightest intention of approaching the shipwreck. The shipwreck seemed to have been washed away by the heavy rain. The seaweed and other attachments on its surface had been washed away, revealing mottled wooden planks and rusted metal frames. It was not a large ship, much smaller than the Flower. Moreover, it was seriously damaged and the cabin could basically be seen from the outside. Marcus led the night squad to surround the shipwreck and was about to enter the cabin for inspection. List suddenly said, "Teacher Marcus, there is no need to waste so much effort. There is definitely something wrong with the shipwreck. Just smash it, dismantle it, and inspect it piece by piece to avoid any accidents." He did not intend to keep a shipwreck with dirty things as a tourist attraction. Therefore, violent dismantling was the safest and fastest way. Marcus naturally would not refuse. He immediately took people to split the shipwreck, dismantled the wooden planks and iron frames and piled them on the beach. During this process, List had been intermittently casting magic eyes. Just as the two retainer knight carried a broken piece of dragon bone, List suddenly saw black magic flickering at the fracture of the dragon bone. Magic power usually had a color. For example, fire magic was mostly red, and water magic was mostly blue, especially when it manifested as chi. But it was not absolute. Some magic showed a variety of mixed attributes and would have a variety of strange colors. Some magic showed no attributes and would also have a variety of colors. Even archmages who had studied magic to a profound realm could not unravel the essence and mystery of magic. What did black magic represent? List did not understand. But he knew that he had probably found the cause of the shipwreck's problem. "Teacher Marcus, carefully examine this dragon bone, I feel traces of magic." After List's reminder, Marcus quickly picked up the dragon bone, touched it with both hands and carefully observed and felt it. After a moment, Marcus's eyes bloomed as he also felt magic. "Sir, there really is a problem, I feel a cold magic." Chapter 120. The keel of a ship was located in the center of the bottom of the ship and was the main load-bearing part from the bow to the stern. After discovering that there was something wrong with this broken keel, it was easy for Marcus to find that the keel was not a complete piece. There were traces of it being pieced together. He then followed the traces and split the keel in half. After splitting the keel, there was a bone embedded in it like a mold. The bone was about a meter long. One end was broken and the other end was the joint. There were dense magic runes engraved on it. What bone is this? There are magic runes on it. It's the work of a magician. This is a magic equipment. The bone is so big. Is it a bone from World of Warcraft? Is there such a big bone in Intermediate World of Warcraft? Could it be a bone from Advanced World of Warcraft? Looking at the bone, Gort and the others began to discuss. List's pupils were as deep as whirlpools. Through the eye of magic he could see that there was a dense flow of magic in the bone. The magic seemed to want to be released, but it was firmly locked by the magic runes on the bone. Only a few slightly dim magic runes had lost some magic power. At this moment, Marcus wanted to reach out and pull the bone out of the keel. But just as his hand touched the bone, the magic runes on it suddenly lit up one by one. Then, with a clatter, the lit magic runes quickly extinguished. A dark light shot out from the bone and went straight for Marcus's face. Marcus's reaction was fast. He threw the keel in his hand away and rolled on the ground. His posture might not be elegant, but his movements were fast. As he rolled, he pulled out his sword and counterattacked the dark light. Boom! The dark light was successfully blocked. In the air, it suddenly dispersed and formed a faint human figure. It only had the upper body and the lower body was like a tattered cloth. Its facial features could not be seen clearly, but it seemed to be the shape of a woman. It had full breasts. There was a pair of hands dangling on both sides of the body. The palms were long and slender and there were actually fingernails made of dim light. The fingernails were at least 10 centimeters long. "Protect the Lord," Marcus bellowed. It was the first time that the retainer knight had encountered such a strange scene, so they were somewhat flustered. However, they still quickly formed a circle around List. Each of them pulled out their spears and nervously stared at the human-shaped thing floating in the air. Gort took 2 steps back and gulped. His voice trembled as he asked, "What is this?" Johann. List had been looking forward to seeing Spectre. Now that he had seen a real Spectre, he was not nervous at all. Instead, he felt a little excited. He found the world more and more interesting. Not only was there magic and combat aura, not only were there dragons and elves, but there were also all kinds of magical existences. Ghosts had already been proven to be real. Then would the vampires, werewolves, unicorns, and singing demons that were described in the Knight's novel also exist? There were also giants and gnomes, which had also appeared in the Knight's novel. Did they exist? Even the humanoid elves, which were also called elves but were as highly intelligent as humans, did they exist? Yuhan. Gort screamed, "Is it really a specter? There really are specter. Incredible. Marcus, you can definitely kill the specter, right?" Marcus and the specter were in a tense confrontation. In fact, it was not really a confrontation because since the specter failed to attack Marcus and appeared, it had been floating in the air, staring blankly and motionless. If it were not for the slight undulation of its body and the faint radiance, it would really look like a slideshow. I can't guarantee that I can kill it. I have never seen a specter. It has no body, just a mass of light. Marcus looked cautious and held the knight's sword with both hands. List, who was protected by the crowd, was still casting magic eyes. He found that the magic in the bone did not seem to have anything to do with the specter. There was not much magic in the specter's body. Because whether it was the magic eyes or the naked eye, the specter he saw was a human half-body composed of dim light and shadow. He quickly recalled all the information about the specter. The specter did not seem to be a ferocious ghost. In the Knight's novels, the protagonists all killed a child with a single slash, and there was no more detailed description of the battle. Even in bedtime stories, the specter was only regarded as a rare thing, not a harmful existence. Just when Marcus could not help but get ready to attack the specter. He did not know which light was triggered. List suddenly felt that the specter could live in the dragon bone, which was a bit like the genie in Aladdin's magic lamp. So he gently stroked his chest in his cloak and took out the floating bottle made of unknown metal from the space ring. Then he threw it to Marcus. "Teacher Marcus, try to see if you can put the specter in it." This was just a whim of his, a little whimsical. But what was amazing was that when the bottle fell into Marcus' hands, the specter suddenly rushed towards Marcus. When Marcus wanted to intercept it with his sword, the specter had quickly submerged into the metal bottle. List was a little stunned. He never thought that he would actually subdue the specter, which was incredible. But when Marcus carefully held the bottle and walked over, he quickly put away his surprise with a calm face and handed the bottle cap to Marcus. Marcus quickly closed the bottle cap. A few magic threads flashed and the metal bottle and the cap had been merged into one without any gap. "My lord, your magic bottle." Marcus respectfully handed the bottle over. He could not see through the lord he followed, as if everything was under the other party's control. The ghost of the shipwreck did not encounter any twists and turns. List took back the bottle, put it back under his cloak, avoided the gazes of others and directly sent the bottle into the gem space. He did not want to be in close contact with the specter, so he sent it to the gem space where everything was still. It would not be too late to study the specter after he had investigated it. But then again, this specter is at least 36D. The metal bottle required the blood of a descendant of the sun to open. Currently, the only source of blood was the leathersmith shop's old leathersmith. The old leathersmith Phil and the serving man Jesse still did not become father and son, but the two were still very close, not father and son but more like father and son. The old leathersmith was, after all, old, so List only used the jade bottle to collect a small amount of his blood and did not ask for more. At the same time, he brought a lot of food for the old leathersmith as compensation. "Jesse, take care of the old leathersmith. I only took a little of his blood for research. I don't want to hurt him. The work in the castle can be shared by other serving men. I will let Mr. Carter arrange it. The most important thing for you now is to take care of the old leathersmith." "Yes, my lord." Jesse nodded. The old leathersmith said, "To be able to contribute to Sir Lord is old Phil's honor." List smiled slightly. "It is good that you can think that way." Chapter 121. The shipwreck was settled. The smoke mission was also completed. Mission completed. Reward, a broken bone. There was no doubt that the reward of this mission was the large bone engraved with magic runes found in the keel. The bone was naturally part of List's collection. Its function was still unclear. But it could be judged that the bone was a magic equipment. It was probably a piece of navigation-related equipment placed in the keel. Subsequently, Captain Costo, who was the most familiar with navigation in Flower Town, answered List's confusion. "Sir Lord, this bone is indeed a magic equipment. It is called Keel Fixer. It can stabilize the ship's keel, thus making the ship more sturdy. However, its biggest function is actually to deter sea monsters." "Keel Fixer?" Deter sea monsters? Casto's tone was fanatical. Most of the keel fixer is made from the bones of high-grade dragons in World of Warcraft. Because it contains dragon bloodline, it can produce a faint dragon might under the stimulation of magic power, thereby scaring away sea monsters. Sir Lord, this keel fixer is tailor-made for the flower. The bones of a high-grade dragon in World of Warcraft. In terms of hierarchy, high-grade dragons in World of Warcraft were even more precious than greater elves. On the islands of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, there were very few dragons of this level in World of Warcraft. In fact, even high-grade dragons in World of Warcraft were rare in the country. On the Coral Island, there was only one mid-grade World of Warcraft purple sand crocodile. This bone was very precious and had been engraved with magic runes by a wizard. List immediately poured his chi into the keel fixer. The magic runes on it gradually lit up. After a while, it had turned into a sparkling bone staff. A faint, heart-palpitating pressure began to emanate from the bone staff. List had felt this kind of pressure before. It was when he faced the invisible dragon. The dragon might made it difficult for him to operate his chi. However, the dragon might brought by the bone staff was a lot weaker and could not affect his chi operation. This dragon might was amplified by magic runes. After all, dragons in World of Warcraft were not dragons, their bloodline was thin. It's a bit weak. The influence of this dragon might is a bit weak. He's actually not weak, my lord. I'm getting goosebumps all over my body and I feel like I'm suffocating. Those sea monsters will definitely run as far as they can after sensing the dragon's might, no matter how big or small they are. That was true. The might of a dragon wasn't something that only humans could understand. It was also the natural enemy of World of Warcraft and sea monsters. Sensing the aura of its natural enemy, it was only natural for it to run. This dragon-fixing bone was a treasure. List handed the keel fixation bone to the retainer knight and said to Casto, "I'll store it first. When the flower goes to sea one day, I'll decide whether or not to place it on the ship." Casto felt a little regretful, but he still bowed. He did not dare to question the Lord's decision. "By the way, Captain Casto, since the shipwreck has a keel, why doesn't the flower have a keel?" List suddenly thought of a problem. The technique to create the keel anchor bone was lost along with the destruction of the Cohen family. I once saw a ship pass down from the Cohen family, and only then did I know what a keel anchor bone was. It was a unique magic equipment manufacturing technique mastered by the mages of the Cohen family. The technique to create the keel anchor bone probably lied in the magic runes engraved on its surface. Marquis Cohen was the founder of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire 100 years ago. He was one of the earliest followers of the Sapphire Grand Duke. However, the Marquis Cohen family seemed to have been involved in a palace coup, and then, there was no later. There was no official record of this matter, and after more than 100 years, no one cared about the Marquis Cohen. There were too many nobles that had been lost in history. Only the living were worth associating with, while the dead were forgotten. Mages who mastered the technique. It was estimated that they would follow Marquis Cohen and become a speck of dust in history. It's a pity that the keel anchor bone is still very useful for sailing. If we want to sail to the Devil's Sea, the keel anchor bone will definitely play a huge supporting role. If we can find a dragon skeleton to make a keel anchor bone, I'm afraid that even the most ferocious of sea monsters will have to flee. Legend had it that there were big storms and sea monsters in the Devil's Sea. Without ships they could only sail on it. List was very curious about the Devil's Sea, or rather the other side of the sea. Sooner or later I will recruit mages to study the keel anchor bone technique for me. Start the age of navigation. There were still many unsolved mysteries. Why was there a specter hidden in the keel anchor bone? How did the specter kill the woman? Why did the specter drill into the metal bottle? Could it continue to survive in the gem space? What was its state of existence? Who was it when it was alive? What did it look like? Why did it have such a majestic 36D? These were all questions. However, List did not continue to think about it for the time being. A new mission was waiting for him. Mission: after the rainstorm, the magic power in the Thorn's Ridge is more abundant than ever. A solitary magic ingredient is breeding a fruit that can change the World of Warcraft bloodline. Perhaps a new intermediate World of Warcraft is about to be born. A crisis is about to befall the Flower Town. Please resolve the crisis. Reward: a bloodline fruit. The bloodline fruit was not a plant species. Rather, it was a relatively special existence among magic ingredients. It was a mutation of an ordinary plant, but it could not be bred. Even if there was a corresponding sprite, it could not be bred. When the fruit condensed enough magic power and fell to the ground, it was the time for the plant to die. Its fruit was called the bloodline fruit. It was a highly condensed form of magic power that could stimulate the bloodline of beasts in World of Warcraft to evolve. Reportedly, beasts that ate the bloodline fruit could condense magic power and become World of Warcraft. Low-level World of Warcraft that ate the bloodline fruit could evolve into high-level World of Warcraft. The bloodline fruit could not be cultivated and was very precious. Moreover, it could only be found by chance. After it fell to the ground, its magic power would gradually decline, and after a few minutes, it would degenerate into an ordinary fruit. Many greater aristocrats were looking for the bloodline fruit to cultivate livestock that could be raised in World of Warcraft. The fire rabbit was a small-scale World of Warcraft artificially cultivated by relying on the bloodline fruit. Of course, the magic power of the bloodline fruit was astonishing. After eating it, the number of beasts in World of Warcraft that were greatly nourished to death was not small. Seeing this mission, List could not remain calm. I have to get the bloodline fruit. Otherwise, if the Thorns Ridge evolves into an intermediate-level World of Warcraft, then the Flower Town will suffer. I don't want to live under the shadow of intermediate-level World of Warcraft. Intermediate World of Warcraft could contend against human Sky Knights. Moreover, by relying on its thick skin, ordinary Sky Knights could not deal with it. The purple sand crocodile had been discovered many years ago in the shallow waters south of the Coral Island, yet it was still alive and well. It was not that the Count did not want to hunt it, but rather that it was too risky. In case the purple sand crocodile killed it instead, the gains would not make up for the losses. He might as well leave the shallow waters to the purple sand crocodile. As long as it did not cross the line, there was no need to take risks. The Count had a large family business and could set aside a place to raise World of Warcraft. List, however, could not. Once the Thorns Ridge evolves into an intermediate-level World of Warcraft, then the Flower Town would not have a moment of peace. Chapter 122. As you wish. Marcus saluted solemnly, his eyes brimming with vigor. A knight needs to be baptized in blood and fire in order to complete an essential transformation. It is time for the members of the knight squad to accept the test. A knight was born to fight. This was Marcus's belief. Now, he convinced himself to lie dormant in the Flower Town, waiting for the start of the war to seize aristocratic glory. But this did not mean that his blood had cooled down. Conquering the Thorns Ridge was an established plan that he had always been looking forward to. List was also not idle. After his purse bulged, he began to hoard weapons. Now he had hoarded a total of 15 sets of knight armor and weapons. A set of knight equipment consisted of a warhorse, a knight spear, a knight sword, a knight round shield, a set of full-body armor, warhorse armor, hammers, flails, and other weapons. The equipment was not required to be of excellent quality, only to be up to the standards of the battlefield. A complete set of equipment would cost as much as 5 gold coins. Hammers and flails were classified as defensive weapons, so there was no need to purchase them. However, a batch of knight spears had to be prepared. On the battlefield, a knight's charge could easily break a knight's spear. Generally, a knight had to be equipped with 3 knight spears. A knight was a big spender. Food for training the body, the cost of equipment, the maintenance of equipment, and the rearing of warhorses all cost money. Baron, who had an ordinary fief, could only support a knight squad with all his might. The once barren Flower Town could not support a knight squad. But now, with the daily gold coins earned from the seafood business, List could finally nurture his own knight squad. Sir, I heard that you want to exterminate the Thorns Ridge World of War. Karl Hammerstein is willing to lead the patrol team and join the extermination. After hearing the news, the town's defense officer Karl immediately rushed to the castle. Soon after, Insect Affairs Officer Rome Winebarrel also rushed to the castle. The insect protection team is made up of serfs, and their combat power is almost zero. However, Rome is willing to serve as Sir's retainer and fight for Sir in the Thorns Ridge. Karl and Luomu were also very weak. List was very satisfied with this intention. I am very gratified by your loyalty and courage. However, the affairs of the Flower Town need you to maintain. There is no need to follow me to clean up World of Warcraft of the Thorns Ridge. Just focus on the Flower Town's defense. In case any World of Warcraft escapes into the town, you will need to step forward. As you wish. Defend the Flower Town to the death. After that, Gort, Blair, and Isaiah all came to show their loyalty and request to go to the battlefield. List also encouraged them. If they really let this group of trash go to the battlefield, they would either be a help or a hindrance. With the urgency of the mission, List had already made preparations. When the sky was clear and the road was still muddy, he was ready to set off. Served by Thomas, he put on a black World of Warcraft leather armor and equipped the gem weapon Red Blood Sword, and then walked out of the castle. His leather boots stepped on the horse farm's alfalfa that still had a little water. He whistled, and Black Dragon, who was grazing in the distance, galloped over. The two retainer knight, Philip and Xavier, came over one after another, carrying List's equipment. The knight didn't carry a spear, only 2 knight swords and a knight round shield. Because they would be fighting in the woods, a spear charge was not suitable. Of course, there was also the bow and arrow. List's archery was second only to Marcus. "Master, this is a smoke grass flint packet." Thomas handed over a few small paper packets wrapped in thick bast paper. Inside the packets were dried smoke grass and flint. In a crisis, as long as the flint at the mouth of the packet was slightly rubbed, it could ignite the paper packet and release the smell of smoke grass. List believed that it could save his life in a crisis. Resolving the crisis that might arise in the Thorns Ridge was no doubt important, but saving his life was even more important. However, the smoke grass flint packet was just a decoy. Inside his gem space, there was a large bundle of smoke grass. At any time he could throw out a bundle of smoke grass to block World of Warcraft. List put his bow and arrows on his back and mounted his horse. List suddenly saw Dosen wagging its tail at him from the edge of the kennel. List's eyes lit up. Dosen could already skillfully release rock thorns. Its body was strong, and its fighting strength was absolutely not much worse than that of the Earth Knight. It was a very good helper. Most importantly, it had been trained to be very obedient and loyal to him. "Thomas, bring Dosen over." "Are you going to bring Dosen to the battlefield?" "That's right." Thomas untied the rope, and Dosen rushed to Black Dragon's side. Black Dragon was very familiar with Dosen, so it wasn't nervous. Dosen also didn't attack Black Dragon. It just kept wagging its tail. "Dosen, follow me." List spurred the horse forward, and Dosen hurriedly followed. It was very obedient. Everything was ready. When they arrived at the junction of the horse field and the main road, Marcus was already waiting with the night squad to set off. Gort and the others were also standing there to welcome the night squad. Dosen didn't have the slightest stage fright. It followed Black Dragon calmly. "Sir, Dosen is already outstanding." Marcus exclaimed in admiration. "That's why I brought it to the Thorns Ridge. In the Thorns Ridge, it has a natural advantage and might be able to bring unexpected help. Yes, for the territory, for the castle, for Sir, it should also make its contribution," Marcus said. It put its right hand on its chest and saluted List. "I'm willing to charge and break through enemy lines for Sir." The other retainer knights followed suit and saluted one after another. "I'm willing to charge and break through enemy lines for Sir." List's expression turned solemn. The sapphire eyes under the helmet swept over his knight squad and said in high spirits, "Let's go to the Thorns Ridge." Black Dragon strode forward, and the other horses followed one after another, tightly clustered around List. There was no dust. There was only water splashing. The night squad trod on the puddles of water, gradually fading away amidst the blessings of Gort and the others. The butler, old Carter, along with the servants, stood at the castle gate, overlooking the backs of the night squad. His face was tense, gratified, and expectant. He put his hands on his chest and loudly blessed. "The glory of the night squad favors Master. Master will surely return with countless honors." "Yes, Mr. Carter, we are all convinced of this," Mrs. Morrison said solemnly. In the stables not far away, one-eyed Barton, with a pipe in his mouth, muttered in a low voice, "The horses of Master's night squad are too disorderly. He should raise a group of black horses that would be handsome enough. However, Master is worthy of being of the Tulip family bloodline. His brilliance is impossible to ignore. May the glory of the night squad forever favor him." The night squad had already gone far away. Gort, Isaiah, and Blair walked together towards the town. "It seems that the threat of the Thorns Ridge will soon be resolved," Gort said in a relaxed tone. Isaiah looked a bit worried. "The World of Warcraft isn't that easy to deal with." "Gort, do you really think that Sir Baron can deal with the World of Warcraft that is good at concealing itself?" "I believe it very much because List is far calmer than you think. Don't think of him as a 16-year-old youngster. He is a qualified lord and a qualified knight. I have seen his archery, it is already on par with Marcus. His sword is a gem weapon gifted by Marquis Merlin." Blair cheerfully said, "Sir is a son of glory favored by the glory of the night squad. The Thorns Ridge isn't difficult, it's just a hard stone to sharpen the blade." Chapter 123. List decided to spend this period of time in the Thorns. He announced to the outside world that he was going to wipe out World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge, and in fact he was indeed preparing to wipe it out. But the most essential purpose was to snatch the bloodline fruit. A carpet search was essential. All the wild beasts that can be hunted must be hunted clean. The Thorns forest is destined to be cut down, there is no need to keep the wild beasts. Marcus was the commander of the Night Squad. He loudly berated the retainer Night Squad. "Wayne, Evan, you two idiots who can't even cultivate chi, you are in charge of collecting the wild beasts' corpses, pile them together and hang them on the trees, understand? When we return we will take all the food with us." This was a plan to exterminate the family. In List's plan, except for the wild fruit trees, all the other trees in the Thorns Ridge should be cut down. Not only would all the World of Warcraft be killed, but all the wild beasts would also be killed. In the future, this place would be developed into farmland. All the stones would be mined to build roads, and all the wood would be used to build houses and make fires. There was no need to protect the environment. List pressed his hand on the red blood sword's hilt. From time to time, his pupils would turn into whirlpools as he released magic eyes to observe the position of the hidden World of Warcraft. This was his greatest reliance in wiping out World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge. Although Marcus didn't know that List had a mysterious chi secret skill like magic eyes, he vaguely guessed that List had the ability to see through magic. As a lord from the Tulip family, it was normal for him to have some secret methods. Therefore he was also full of confidence. Dosen was probably the most fearless. It was his first time coming to the Thorns Ridge, so the dog was trembling with excitement, jumping back and forth with great joy. "Dosen, quiet," List softly called out. In the field of vision of magic eyes, Dosen's chi was yellow, Marcus's was cyan, and the other retainer Night Squad members were blurry ash-gray chi, which had yet to reveal their chi attributes. Rustle, rustle, rustle. A hare jumped out of the bushes. Marcus didn't move. A retainer knight who had cultivated chi suddenly spurred his horse forward and lightly stabbed with his sword, killing the hare. His movements were smooth. With the help of his chi and the constant training of the night course, the young squire, who was only 12 years old, was already very agile, far surpassing an adult. The long sword shook, and the wild rabbit's corpse was thrown to the back of the group. Wayne, who had yet to cultivate his fighting energy, hurriedly caught the wild rabbit's carcass. He took out a rope and tied the wild rabbit's legs before throwing it behind the horse. There were already several small animal carcasses hanging behind the horse, the largest of which was a roe deer. Just like that, the night party pushed forward for the entire morning. They did not encounter a single World of Warcraft, but they killed a large number of wild beasts. When there were a certain number of them, they would tie the carcasses together and hang them on the trees. This would prevent most of the wild beasts from stealing the carcasses. There was no lack of food in the town. Some of these wild beasts would be pickled and smoked to be stored in the castle. Some would be distributed to subordinates and their families to win over the hearts of the people. The rest that couldn't be eaten would be sold in the seafood store. The seafood store was the castle's industry, designed to provide seafood for the subjects. List had already determined the price of the wild beasts, which was only a bit more expensive than black bread. This way the town's residents could taste the wild beasts of the Thorns Ridge. It could be considered as a gift from the Lord. List was a good person, he always thought so. The subjects also thought so. There had never been a lord who gave such preferential treatment to his serfs. Lunch was to roast the wild beasts in the Thorns Ridge. The retainer knight brought seasonings for the food. After cleaning the meat, they sprinkled seasonings, skewered it on a stick and roasted it on the spot. The flames quickly roasted the wild beasts until they were tender on the inside and charred on the outside. The aroma spread, stirring people's appetites. It also successfully attracted the nearby wild beasts, which then became the retainer knight's practice targets. In this morning, the retainer knight's swordsmanship rose rapidly. Their combat experience allowed them to grow rapidly, no longer panicking and no longer panicking. It will take about 3 days to thoroughly search the Thorns Ridge in the south. It is inevitable that some will slip through the net. Since they cannot find food in the forest, they are likely to flee to the flower town. Marcus ate the roasted meat while analyzing the consequences of the battle. List didn't let the retainer knight help him roast the meat. He roasted a roe deer leg himself. Using a dagger, he cut open the meat, sprinkled seasonings and brushed several layers of oil. The skin was roasted until it was golden brown, and the oil and seasonings seeped into the meat. This craftsmanship, which he had tested a few times in the castle, was very good. Aristocrats didn't enter the kitchen, but in the wilderness, it was very common for them to roast meat by themselves. After all, roasting meat was an elegant pleasure. Before setting off, I had already instructed Teacher Gort that the fief's residents, unless necessary, should not rashly go out in the near future. Even if they go out to work, they should go in groups. After this period of time, the logging team will cut down all the timber in the Thorns Ridge, and the flower town will be completely free of worries. List poked the roe deer leg with a dagger. He felt that the meat was cooked enough. He blew on the golden skin and took a light bite. As if biting a crispy biscuit, the skin was already crispy. The meat was also cooked and could be easily torn apart. The aroma, accompanied by the scalding heat, blossomed on the tongue. It was so hot that List wanted to spit it out, yet he was reluctant to do so. It was too fragrant. List ate the meat while exhaling. Delicious. In his heart, he praised himself fiercely. Halfway through eating the roe deer leg, he remembered that he should observe the surroundings to see if there were any World of Warcraft lurking around. As soon as he released magic eyes, he suddenly discovered that there was a flying dust dog formed of yellow magic power in front of the bonfire. If it wasn't for Dosen snuggling up to his leg, he would have thought that it was Dosen. "Teacher Marcus, do you see the thick tree trunk in front of the left?" He calmly reminded Marcus. He put down the roe deer leg in his hand and touched the bow and arrow on his back. Marcus raised his eyebrows. "I see it. Is there a situation, sir?" "There is a World of Warcraft hidden in the grass on the left side of the tree trunk. It could be a windblade wolf or a flying dust dog." List did not immediately determine what World of Warcraft it was. Marcus nodded. His expression was solemn. He turned to the retainer knight beside him and made a few simple gestures. This was a common way for knight to communicate on the battlefield. After all, they couldn't always rely on shouting. It meant that they should be on alert and that there was an enemy in the direction he pointed. Everyone should pass the message to each other. Without batting an eyelid, all the retainer knights received the signal. They all held their weapons in their hands and began to move slowly toward the grass to surround it. Dosen seemed to feel the tension in the atmosphere. It stood up in a flash, its fur a little stiff. List softly comforted it. "Don't move, Dosen. Listen to my command." Dosen restrained its impulsive momentum. Its pair of dog eyes turned around and its nose began to sniff the air. It was busy smelling the barbecue before. The inescapable net had been set. List and Marcus looked at each other. They each raised their bows and arrows, loaded 2 arrows on the bowstrings and aimed at the grass. Then they shouted, "Release!" The 2 instantly let go of the arrows in their hands. 4 arrows shot into the grass from different directions. Marcus didn't know the position of World of Warcraft, so his arrows were slightly off. However, List's arrows were very accurate. They were aimed at World of Warcraft's head. Pucci. Not surprisingly. Only List's arrows. One of them hit World of Warcraft's back. At the critical moment, World of Warcraft reacted very quickly and twisted its body to avoid the dangerous attack. With this movement, World of Warcraft had already jumped out of the grass. The arrow on its back didn't go too deep. It directly pounced on the nearest retainer knight. It still dared to fight back. "It's a flying dust dog." Marcus once again raised his bow and shot at the position of the flying dust dog, saving the retainer knight's life. Chapter 124. Flying Dust Dog, King of Thorns Ridge, powerful low-level World of Warcraft. It was likely to be related to Dosen by blood. Dosen's mother was dead, but its father was likely to be the one in front of it. Although it might be a relative, it didn't prevent Dosen from launching an attack under List's command. Mana sprayed out from its mouth, crossed the barrier of space and accurately gathered at the target location, forming an earth attribute spell, Rockthorn. Whoosh! Rockthorn sprang out from the ground under the flying dust dog's abdomen, almost piercing through it. The flying dust dog quickly dodged the rockthorn with dexterous movements, and continued to evade the 4 arrows shot at it. Then it adjusted its posture and once again charged at the retainer knight. The retainer knight got a breather. He was already ready to defend, holding the knight's round shield in front of him. But he suddenly heard the Sir Lord shout, "Zachary, roll!" His body involuntarily followed the voice's command, falling to the side and rolling twice on the muddy ground. During the night training course, Marcus had repeatedly brainwashed them with the idea of "the Lord is supreme," and had absolutely obeyed the Sir Lord's command. Therefore, Zachary didn't need to think, his body had already produced a conditioned reflex, acting according to List's command. This time, obeying the command saved his life. At his original position, a thick rockthorn pierced out from the ground. If Zachary hadn't dodged, the rockthorn would have fiercely stabbed into his body, most likely from a key part. Cold sweat trickled down his back. Zachary swallowed with difficulty. He was even more grateful to the Sir Lord for reminding him. But he didn't have much time to be grateful. The flying dust dog missed and once again pounced at him. It seemed to have locked onto him and wouldn't stop until he was bitten to death. "Sir, you shoot the arrows, I'll charge." Marcus couldn't help but shout when he saw that the bow and arrow couldn't hit the flying dust dog. Liszt had no objections to such an order. At this moment he had completely transformed into a qualified archer. Standing at the back and dealing damage was the most important thing. Moreover, he also had to command Dosen to release magic and remind the retainer knight to avoid the rock thorns. The mission was very important. There was order in the chaotic battle scene. Although the flying dust dog was fierce and its rock thorns were elusive, under the observation of Liszt's magic eyes, its every move could not be hidden. Apart from scratching a squire knight who could not dodge in time, the other rock thorns did not achieve anything at all. It took about 10 minutes. The mana of the flying dust dog had fallen to a low point. Based on Dosen's experience of releasing magic every day, Liszt understood that it would be difficult for the flying dust dog to release rock thorns in a short period of time. He suddenly pulled out the red blood sword. "Charge, kill it." The black dragon horse raised its head high and galloped toward the flying dust dog, who was surrounded and had nowhere to run. Dosen also charged together. It didn't understand what it meant to kill its own kind. Liszt's order was its code of conduct. 2 Earth Knights, 10 Trainee Knight and 2 Odd Job Knights. 14 people besieging the magic-exhausted flying dust dog. The outcome was already decided. All the knight had practiced a joint attack routine and firmly stood in their positions. In the end, Marcus faced the attack head-on, while Liszt took the opportunity to attack. Heart of Fire Dragon Drill. The red blood sword, combined with the ultimate meaning of the Fire Dragon Drill, had an unparalleled momentum, completely shrouding the flying dust dog's escape route. The sky was filled with blazing flames. It was Liszt's explosive chi. Whoa! The flying dust dog screamed again and again. The King of Thorns Ridge, hunted by the humans, could only nurse a grievance. It didn't take much effort for it to fall. Liszt calmly put away the red blood sword, waiting for the flames to extinguish. He wanted to see the miserable end of the World of Warcraft that he had killed with his own hands. But just when everyone was somewhat relaxed, the flames were about to disperse, when a charred shadow fiercely scuttled out and rushed out of the loose encirclement. Impressively, it was the flying dust dog that should have been killed by Liszt's big move. It was already riddled with scars and even emitted a faint smell of barbecued meat, yet it still had the ability to run. Pursue. The fat meat that was already in his mouth had escaped. How could Liszt bear it? The night squad didn't bother to clean up the barbecue stall and chased after it. Dosen took the lead and chased after the charred flying dust dog. "Sir, be careful, we might encounter other World of Warcraft." Marcus was in a gloomy mood. "I didn't expect a flying dust dog to be so difficult to deal with, feigning death and escaping. It was also my carelessness. Before confirming World of Warcraft's death, I can't relax at all. They are very cunning." World of Warcraft is indeed cunning, but it won't survive. Its body is almost burnt. Liszt's momentum was still high, not much affected. On the battlefield, he was indeed greedy for life and afraid of death, habitually hiding in the back. But once he decided on something, he would do his best to complete it. Since he said he wanted to kill the flying dust dog, he absolutely wouldn't let it have any chance to breathe. With magic eyes, he could already see the timing of World of Warcraft's magic release, which meant that the World of Warcraft he was facing had no fatal magic. World of Warcraft without magic was no different from a beast. Thorns Forest, Liszt could go anywhere. A moment later, the running flying dust dog finally stopped. It stopped in front of a plant, panting heavily, its charred wounds bleeding everywhere. It turned its head to look at the charging Dosen and the large group of knight behind him, and seemed to have made a decision. Its gaze moved to the golden fist-sized fruit on the plant's branch. It leaped and was about to eat the golden fruit. However, a sharp sound came from behind, and the next moment the flying dust dog felt its body being carried by a force, abruptly jumping half a meter forward. The dog's mouth brushed past the golden fruit, and after falling to the ground, pain spread throughout its body, and it could no longer hold on. It was dead. Not far behind, Liszt put down his bow and let out a sigh of relief. "Good beast, it can really run. Fortunately, I arrived in time." Magic Eyes had already discovered the fruit condensed from magic. The bloodline fruit was obviously not ripe, and if it was eaten by the flying dust dog now, it would be a waste. Dosen squatted next to the corpse of the flying dust dog, its pair of dog eyes staring at the golden fruit, saliva dripping down like a waterfall. It also felt the attraction of the bloodline fruit. Dosen, shut up. List scolded, calling back Dosen, who was looking at the bloodline fruit. Woof woof. Dosen immediately wagged its tail at List, constantly looking at the golden fruit, obviously fawning over List, hoping to eat the bloodline fruit. Don't be impatient, it is not ripe yet. List dismounted, glanced around, and after confirming that there were no other World of Warcraft, he shifted his gaze to the bloodline fruit. It was an unknown plant, probably some kind of fern. It only bore a golden bloodline fruit which seemed a bit out of place. The fruit was very beautiful, round and plump, and in addition to the brilliant golden color, there was a little crystal texture under the skin. There was no fragrance and there were no signs of magic being emitted, but in the vision of magic eyes, it contained a thick amount of magic. It was almost solidified. Chapter 125. Marcus had some understanding of the value of the bloodline fruit. Greater nobles were often willing to spend thousands of gold coins in exchange for the location where a bloodline fruit grew. If it wasn't for the risk of failure, the bloodline fruit's value might have been calculated in dragon coins. He was both excited and glad. Fortunately, we launched the operation to clear out World of Warcraft in Thorn's Ridge early. Otherwise, once the bloodline fruit matured, the flying dust dog might have broken through further, making it even harder to hunt. It was for this reason that List wanted to clear out the Thorn's Ridge ahead of time. He reached out to touch the bloodline fruit, but it was a pity that humans couldn't eat it. It seems that this bloodline fruit will soon mature. The flying dust dog originally wanted to take advantage of it, but now it belongs to me. Sir, once this treasure matures, it will inevitably attract World of Warcraft in Thorn's Ridge. Those World of Warcraft have keen senses, so they must be nearby, waiting for the bloodline fruit to mature. Isn't that just right? List suddenly had an idea. We can use the bloodline fruit as bait and lay traps in the surroundings. I'll lead the night squad to lay traps, Marcus said excitedly. Before entering the Thorn's Ridge, the night squad had made ample preparations, bringing a lot of ropes, shovels, and tongs. The night squad had also learned a lot of hunter skills. A knight not only had to charge on the battlefield, but also had to enter forests to hunt World of Warcraft. Marcus was a connoisseur. After all, he had laid a lot of lassos along some World of Warcraft routes. These lassos couldn't stop World of Warcraft, but they could obstruct World of Warcraft operations. Hunting still depended on him and List's damage output. By the time all the traps were laid, it was already evening. During this time, List stayed next to the bloodline fruit, waiting for it to mature. At the same time, he was wondering whether he should give the bloodline fruit to Dosen or Black Dragon. Dosen was a low-level World of Warcraft. After eating it, there was a chance that it would evolve into an intermediate World of Warcraft. Of course, there was a chance that the evolution would fail, but it was unlikely that he would explode and die. Black Dragon was a dragon-type beast. After eating it, it was possible to evolve into a low-grade dragon-type World of Warcraft, but it was also possible for the evolution to fail and even explode. Let's give it to Dosen. Black dragon horses are extremely rare dragon species wild beasts that shoulder the heavy responsibility of breeding the black dragon horse herd. It can't be lost. List decided after some consideration. As for the blessed curls in the castle, he directly ignored it. The sun set in the west. The bonfire was lit again. List took the front leg of the flying dust dog handed to him by a squire and skewered it on a stick, preparing to roast it for dinner. His physique grew stronger day by day, and his do chi continued to rise. At this stage of the Earth Knight, his progress was extremely fast. Compared to an ordinary Earth Knight, he could not be mentioned in the same breath. There was no other reason but to eat well. Of course, cultivation depended on talent, but the essence was the intake and use of nutrients. If he ate World of Warcraft meat every day, then perhaps even a pig could be piled up into a magic pig. If he couldn't even eat his fill, then even if he had extraordinary talent, he still wouldn't be able to cultivate do chi. Woof woof. Dosen barked at him while drooling over the World of Warcraft meat in List's hand. List patted Dosen's big head. You can't eat this. It might be your father's meat, and even if it's not your father, it might be your uncle. In any case, it will more or less be related to you. Father and son killing each other was already cruel enough, but father and son cannibalism was also morally unacceptable. Therefore, Dosen could only get a roasted hare. Then drooling, he watched as List held the flying dust dog's leg and gorged on it while he gnawed on the skinny hare. No need to be envious, your good stuff is here. List pointed to the bloodline fruit, which was Dosun's great opportunity. Looking at the magic power, it is close to materializing and will soon ripen, probably by tonight. Dosun, conserve your strength. I hope that after tonight, you can become an intermediate World of Warcraft. Intermediate World of Warcraft was comparable to a Sky Knight. Moreover, a trained World of Warcraft could go to the battlefield. Having an intermediate World of Warcraft was equivalent to having a Sky Knight as a retainer, and a retainer without ambition at that. As the master of a mid-level magical beast, all he had to do was wait for his promotion to nobility. Can Dosun evolve? List mused. He couldn't be sure. There were all kinds of powerful World of Warcraft in the world, but on the Coral Island World of Warcraft was basically all low-level, with only one purple sand crocodile. The Flying Dust Dog was known as the King of the Thorns Ridge, but it was still a low-level World of Warcraft. It was hard to judge whether it would take the opportunity to rewrite its bloodline, or if it would fail and waste a bloodline fruit. Sir, do you want to rest for a while? Marcus asked after returning from his patrol. No need, it's no big deal to stay up late once in a while. Time passed. The night gradually deepened. Apart from the crackling of the bonfire from time to time, the entire Thorns Ridge was only left with the sound of the wind, unknown insects, and the occasional cries of small animals. Dosun was already lying at List's feet, snoring evenly. List leaned against a tree trunk, still in high spirits as he stared at the bloodline fruit. After a long time, List's eyes suddenly flashed with vigor, his spirits roused. It's about to ripen, I can feel that the magic power is about to escape from the bloodline fruit, it has reached the critical point. He kicked Dosun to wake Dosun up. He then shouted to Marcus, Teacher Marcus, the bloodline fruit is about to ripen, tell the knight to be alert and deal with the possible World of Warcraft. Is it about to ripen? Marcus looked serious and quickly informed the knight squad to get ready. At this time, the bloodline fruit suddenly fell, and an oppressive fragrance quickly spread. It ripened. List quickly picked up the bloodline fruit and gave it to Dosun. Eat it, Dosun, eat it. The bloodline fruit only existed for a few minutes, and wasting even a moment would cause a part of the magic power to dissipate, greatly reducing the effect. Dosun understood that this was a good thing. The dog opened its mouth and swallowed the bloodline fruit in one gulp. At the same time, List, who was using magic eyes, noticed that there were several magic shadows in the surroundings and quickly attacked. Marcus, enemy attack. There are World of Warcraft in the east, southwest, and northwest. Crack, crack. The traps were the first to play a role, entangling two World of Warcraft. Marcus took the lead and rushed to a World of Warcraft in the east. This World of Warcraft was not unfamiliar, it was a Flying Dust Dog. It turned out that Dosun wasn't the only Flying Dust Dog in the Thorns Ridge. For a moment, wind attribute chi surged out, and the Flying Dust Dog, whose hind legs were tied by a rope, was hit before it could display its abilities. It immediately released rock thorns to counterattack, forcing Marcus to dodge nervously, unable to kill the Flying Dust Dog for a while. The World of Warcraft in the southwest was also roped. Several retainer knight roared and attacked. List pulled out the red blood sword and glanced at the World of Warcraft in the shape of a wild boar. In the Thorns Ridge, there was only one World of Warcraft in the shape of a wild boar. It was the Thundertusk boar that had attacked the Flower Town in the winter. This was a World of Warcraft of lightning, its teeth could release the lightning magic, Thunderbolt Flash. Crack. The Thundertusk boar released Thunderbolt Flash without hesitation, lighting up the woods. Retreat. Approach. Raise the shield. Stab the sword. Release your chi. List issued 5 commands in one breath. The retainer knight retreated reflexively and gathered together. At the same time, they raised their shields and stabbed their swords into the ground, releasing their chi and attaching it to the knight's round shield. Boom. Like a whip, the lightning struck the knight's round shield, sending 2 retainer knight flying. Ah. Chapter 126. The blood-curdling screams were heart-palpitating. But the 2 retainer knight could still struggle to get up after falling to the ground. Clearly they weren't seriously injured. Good response to resolve the powerful magic. They had all practiced resistance routines against World of Warcraft that they might encounter in the Thorns Ridge. The Thundertusk boar was one of them. Retreating was to wait for lightning flash to weaken. Lightning magic was the most severely weakened magic. The farther the distance, the weaker its power. Moreover, the Thundertusk boar would take a long time to prepare before releasing lightning flash. Approaching was to disperse the attack of lightning flash on a single target. Raising the shield was to expand the lightning strike area and protect the body. Inserting the sword was to direct the power of lightning magic into the ground. Releasing chi was to use chi to resolve the remaining power of lightning magic. Although 2 retainer knight were sent flying, it was already a successful strategy for a group of apprentice knight to successfully resolve the powerful magic attack. Everyone listen to my command, Wandering Strike. Stall the Thundertusk boar and wait for my joint attack. Marcus finally freed his attention from the violent dog's rock thorns and hurriedly ordered the retainer knight. He was the commander of the battlefield and needed to coordinate the entire situation. Sir, there is another world of Warcraft. Leave this one to me. List's voice was cold. He had magic eyes and was far safer than the others. It's just a snake world of Warcraft. The red blood sword was attached with fire-attributed chi and slowly ignited. He had already rushed towards the snake world of Warcraft in the northwest. There was no record of a snake world of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge. But regardless of whether there was a record or not, List had to face this snake. Dosen could no longer be counted on. After eating the bloodline fruit, it slumped to the ground and seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. Fire Dragon Pierce. With magic eyes locked onto the opponent, List didn't hesitate to attack. The red blood sword turned into a blood-colored arrow and pierced the snake world of Warcraft's weak point. The weak point was clearly where the magic converged, which was clearly seen by his magic eyes. If you want to hit a snake, hit it where it hurts the most. This was the weakest point of snakes. If you hit it, it would definitely die. The snake world of Warcraft clearly felt that it was in mortal danger. Its short, thick body twisted and dodged the attack while spitting out mana. List jumped up and dodged the attack. A pitch-black whirlpool formed at the spot he jumped from, rapidly corroding the withered grass and fallen leaves on the ground into dregs. Black demonic vortex. It's a shadow snake. He quickly identified the snake he was hunting in World of Warcraft. It was a shadow snake. Shadow Serpent was a dark-type World of Warcraft. They mostly lived in swamps and dark, damp woodlands, and could release the black magic vortex. Darkness-attributed mana itself had a corrosive effect. Once hit by the black magic vortex, it would instantly corrode a person's body. It was a vicious World of Warcraft, but the body was weak. If it was Marcus, the shadow snake might have already broken his legs and devoured him. However, it met List, who could easily dodge the magic. The only problem left was how to kill it. Heart of Fire Dragon Drill. The first move was an ultimate skill. A sky full of fire rained down on the shadow snake, causing it to curl up into a ball and not even have the chance to release magic. Even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit. List never knew what it meant to conserve his strength. His style was either to attack from the back or blindly attack from the front. Puchi. The flames ignited the shadow snake's skin. The pain caused by the burning caused the shadow snake to continuously roll around, trying to extinguish the flames. Perhaps the temperature of the flames interfered with the shadow snake's judgment, but it actually randomly released magic. In a small area, it released 3 black magic vortexes, but they were all far away from List. Facing such a stubborn shadow snake, List smiled in relief. He raised the red blood sword high up, aimed at the snake's weak point and slashed down. Crack. With one slash, the shadow snake was cut in half. The lower half twisted frantically, while the upper half remained motionless. However, the snake's mouth was still opening and closing. The magic could not be released. All that was left for it was death. Phew. List spat out a mouthful of turbid air, and there was a moment of absent-mindedness. Not long ago he was still a good-for-nothing, but now he could easily kill a World of Warcraft. The shadow snake was not very strong, but it was still a low-level World of Warcraft, and its strength was comparable to an Earth Knight. But in front of him it could only be beaten. In less than 10 moves it was cut in 2. So I am already so strong, comparable to an elite Earth Knight. Although the magic eyes could see through the real situation, and the red blood sword increased its power, it was enough to prove that List had become stronger. The next moment, regardless of whether the shadow snake was still twisting in half, he carried the red blood sword, mounted the horse and went straight to the Thundertusk boar. Some World of Warcraft needed to be fought on foot, while some World of Warcraft was suitable for riding. The Thundertusk boar was huge and had thick skin, so it needed to be hunted with the help of the horse. Charge. The man and horse became one and chi gushed out. The red blood sword cut through the air, making a sharp vibrating sound. When he rushed into the battlefield, the Thundertusk boar was just about to release magic, but it was knocked away by List's prairie fire slash. Blood spilled on the spot and the magic was suppressed. However, the Thundertusk boar had thick skin and flesh, so it was not a big deal. It got up and charged at List again. But it only ran 2 steps and its body was knocked away again. It was Marcus who had taken care of the flying dust dog who charged at List. His left leg was injured and blood was flowing out. Obviously, it had been grazed by the rock thorns of the flying dust dog. But this did not affect his charge on the warhorse. Sir, joint attack. I'll take the left, you take the right. Each of us will charge at the same time. Listen to my command and make it unable to release magic. Okay. The two exchanged simple words and List charged again, knocking the Thundertusk boar over again. Without waiting for the Thundertusk boar to get up, Marcus charged again, knocking the Thundertusk boar to the ground again. The two elite Earth Knights, you take 1 round, I take 1 round. As their cooperation became more and more skillful, the Thundertusk boar no longer had the chance to get up, nor could it release Thunderbolt Flash. It could only roar in frustration and the wounds on its body increased. Soon it was dyed red by its own blood, and then black by the mud on the ground. The exhausted retainer knight who had been tossed around by the Thundertusk boar, lit torches and surrounded the battlefield, preventing the Thundertusk boar from escaping. Seeing the 2 Earth Knights toying with the Thundertusk boar, their blood surged, and they wished they could personally go on the field and ravage World of Warcraft. They charged back and forth a dozen times. Marcus's warhorse was so tired that it couldn't lift its hooves, and Black Dragon was also panting heavily. The Thundertusk boar finally stopped groaning and lay on the ground, not exhaling much. Finally killed it. List gasped for breath. The Thundertusk boar wasn't much of a threat to the Earth Knight. It moved clumsily, released magic slowly, and was easy to dodge. However, its hide was too thick, and List could only rely on soft tactics to exhaust it to death. Marcus's complexion was pale, and his left leg was bleeding a lot, injuring his vitality. But he still roared at the first moment, "Everyone, don't just stand there. Quickly clean up the battlefield, we are leaving." After saying that, he dismounted and prepared to bandage his wounds. Chapter 127. It was the Windblade Wolves. This group of cunning fellows did not come to snatch the bloodline fruit at the first moment, but appeared after a big battle, wanting to reap the benefits. The previous 3 World of Warcraft had left the team in a flurry. Now they were facing 7 at once and at night, and their condition was not good. It would be difficult to defeat this group of Windblade Wolves. "Sir, let's retreat." Marcus directly took out the smoke grass flint bag distributed in his hand. "Fighting at night is very disadvantageous for us. The trap can't stop the wolves and my left leg is injured. I can't use my full strength. Now ignite the smoke grass. I will cast multiple arrows to cover Sir's retreat. We will retreat in the direction of the main road." List was very straightforward. Okay. When fighting, it had to be vigorous, and when escaping, it had to be straightforward. The flint had not been rubbed yet. A mournful wolf's cry pierced the eardrums. "A-woo, a-woo, a-woo." List turned his head and saw that Dosen, who had been sleeping on the ground, had stood up at some point, raised his head and howled at the sky. Its body seemed to inflate like a balloon, that was the bulging muscles under the fur, its eyes were bloodshot, and its teeth became more ferocious and sharp. He quickly cast magic eyes. List saw that Dosen's earth-yellow magic power, like a rising flame, looked like a fierce beast bathed in fire. "Dosen." Trembling Woods heard List shout and turned his head, his eyes filled with a moment of confusion. The next moment, a familiar scene flashed and List's command came to its ears, "Attack the prey." It involuntarily rushed out in the direction List pointed. There were 2 Windblade Wolves there. Seeing Dosen rushing over, they hurriedly retreated, but Dosen's speed was already very fast. He caught up with the Windblade Wolves in 2 steps, and opened his mouth to release magic. An even thicker rock spike sprang out from the ground, directly skewered one of the Windblade Wolves, completely piercing its stomach, its intestines and blood leaking out together. "Whoa!" The Windblade Wolf let out a blood-curdling scream. The other 6 Windblade Wolves rushed over one after another, pouncing towards Dosen. There was no prelude to the battle, and it immediately started. The wind blades of the Windblade Wolves were thrown randomly. Branches and tree trunks were directly sliced apart. Even the ground was plowed, leaving many trenches. On the other hand, Dosen's rock thorns were fired accurately, each time leaving a scratch on the Windblade Wolf. It was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep, its might unparalleled. When the Windblade Wolves wanted to bite it, they would often be sent flying with a slap. Even if it was bitten, it would only break the skin. Its muscles bulged up like a balloon, allowing it to effectively avoid the damage from the Windblade Wolf's sharp teeth. Then it would turn around and bite the Windblade Wolf. The Windblade Wolf would definitely not be able to withstand it and would scream as it jumped away. Blood was splattering and magic was flying. The battle between the wolf and the dog was exceptionally tragic. Dosen, evolved? Marcus's hand that was holding the smoke grass flint bag trembled slightly. The scene was truly too spectacular. The flying dust dog had taken on 6 Windblade wolves at once. List's breathing was slightly hurried. He had just seen the look in Dosen's eyes, and it was as if it did not recognize him. There was even a faint bloodthirsty aura, which was the instinct of a wild beast. He did not doubt that Dosen would attack him the next moment. Fortunately, at the crucial moment he did not panic and his mind was still clear. He quickly issued an attack order to divert Dosen's attention. Sure enough, it was as he expected. Dosen's order was a conditioned reflex, and he subconsciously rushed out to attack the Windblade wolves. What he did not expect was that Dosen was actually able to take on 6 at once, and was not at a disadvantage at all. I don't know, its magic is very violent. Maybe it has evolved, maybe it hasn't. Whatever it is, it needs to vent. List's tone was calm, but it contained a trace of indifference. Teacher Marcus, Dosen seems to have received the bloodline fruit, and his bestial nature has been triggered. Prepare to kill. If Trembling Woods really didn't care about his own family and attacked him, he would not be lenient. Marcus nodded his head, took out his bow and arrow, and retreated to the vicinity of the intact trap while paying close attention to the scene of the wolf-dog battle. Understood. The retainer knights stood in formation, protecting List in the middle. They waited quietly. The battle did not last long. The incomparably violent Dosen found an opportunity to kill a Windblade wolf with a rock spike, breaking the wolf pack's encirclement, and then began his path of slaughter. It suddenly grabbed a Windblade wolf, and before it could twist its body to escape, another rock spike emerged and pierced through it. It knew how to use magic far better than the Windblade wolf. Rockspike was originally a magic suitable for sneak attacks, and it had been trained by List for a long time. One by one, the Windblade wolf was cruelly stabbed to death, and the violent aura on its body gradually calmed down. When it was preparing to kill the last Windblade wolf, its magic was unexpectedly exhausted, and it could not release Rockspike. It watched helplessly as the Windblade wolf escaped, and fled into the distance without looking back. For a moment, it panted heavily and forgot to pursue. But the next moment, 4 sharp arrows flew out, nailing the heavily injured Windblade wolf to the ground. It was List and Marcus who attacked at the same time and picked up a loophole. After shooting the escaping Windblade wolf, the two once again knocked their arrows and aimed at Dosen. They did not shoot. List gently called out to the panting Dosen, "Dosen, sit down." Dosen was stunned, and its bloodthirsty eyes flickered, as if it did not understand List's command, and did not recognize who List was. It just panted, staring at List and the others, and did not move. List maintained his shooting posture. He had mixed feelings in his heart. He had been tamed for half a year, and even if he was not raised as a pet, he had still developed feelings for him. He did not want to become strangers like this and then kill Dosen with his own hands. He would not only lose a bloodline fruit but also many beautiful things. Time passed bit by bit. List's mood also became gloomy little by little. However, at this moment, Trembling Woods slowly sat down and barked at him twice. In an instant, his mood suddenly lightened up. List laughed and waved his hand, "Dosen, come back." Trembling Woods immediately wagged its tail and ran towards him with a limp. List dismounted and stroked Dosen's fur. Dosen cooperated and licked the palm of List's hand. The bloodthirsty scarlet in its eyes had already receded, and it had regained its former spirited look. Marcus revealed a smile, turned around and shouted, "Clean up the battlefield, clean up the prey, let's go back." The retainer knight was relieved from their tense mood. They laughed as they picked up the World of Warcraft corpses, wrapped them up and hung them on their horses. After this battle, there might not be a single World of Warcraft left in the southern Thorns Ridge. The Thorns Ridge had been separated by the main road, and a fence had been built, completely separating the northern and southern parts. "How's the leg injury?" List asked. Marcus replied while bandaging the wound, "It's just a superficial wound, no bone injury." "Sir, did Dosen evolve into an intermediate World of Warcraft?" Chapter 128. Dosen had indeed grown bigger, mainly due to his well-developed muscles. He felt a bit swollen due to the mana from the bloodline fruit. "Teacher Marcus, have you seen intermediate World of Warcraft before?" "No. Me neither." Not everyone could see Intermediate World of Warcraft. Just like the Coral Island only had one Sky Knight, the Purple Sand Crocodile, the entire island only had one Intermediate World of Warcraft. This was not a crocodile in a zoo that could be visited with a ticket. Intermediate World of Warcraft magic was no longer unique. According to the records of Tulip Castle, the Purple Sand Crocodile was a water element World of Warcraft. It had released 3 types of magic in a tentative confrontation with Orders of Chivalry. They were Water Arrow Volley, Water Wave Shield, and the very powerful Water Waterfall, which could create a 10-meter-high wave that could smash an Earth Knight to death. Therefore, List was not sure whether Dosen had evolved to Intermediate World of Warcraft or not. At least from the current state, Dosen had not changed much. Even in its berserk state, it did not have an overwhelming advantage against the Windblade Wolves. The numerous wounds on its body were proof. In any case, the Bloodline Fruit should have brought some changes to Trembling Woods. Subtly, it should have made Trembling Woods stronger. List comforted himself. The Night Squad had been tidying up the World of Warcraft corpses for a long time. The main reason was that the Thundertusk boar was too big. It was estimated to be the weight of an adult hippopotamus, which was close to 3 tons. No matter how strong a horse was, it could not carry the Thundertusk boar. There were also 2 flying dust dogs, 7 Windblade wolves and a shadow snake. Today's harvest was huge. Send some of the World of Warcraft corpses back first, then bring the caravan's carriages over. There are still a lot of beast corpses in this thorn forest, Marcus said after some thought. List did not have any objections. He was too lazy to think about such trivial matters. Now he just wanted to go back to the castle, take a bath and sleep. On the way back he summoned the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, 1 Bloodline Fruit. Mission: you have launched an attack and are determined to clear the Thorns Ridge and create a new peaceful environment for the Flower Town. Therefore, complete the massacre of all World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge in one go. Reward, traces of the Black Dragon horses. The new mission made List feel refreshed. The reward turned out to be the trail of the Black Dragon horse herd. He had always wondered if the Black Dragon horse was alone. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any horses on the island, but who could guarantee that there wouldn't be a herd of horses? After all, this was a world full of magic. He didn't expect the smoke mission to give him a clue. There were indeed Black Dragon horses. This was a dragon stallion, its value was self-evident. Originally, after clearing the southern Thorns Ridge and finding the Bloodline Fruit, I planned to take a break. Now it seems that I can't rest. I have to finish the cleanup work in one go and welcome my Black Dragon horses. The moon had already set. The sky was full of twinkling stars. Under the illumination of the stars, List and his night squad returned to the castle with a bountiful harvest. The castle's lanterns were lit. The butler, old Carter, had been waiting. He didn't know when the castle's master would return. According to List's instructions before leaving, if he didn't return at night, then there was no need to wait. But he still got up from time to time and went to the window to take a look outside. Then he saw the torches. The Lord has returned. Carter felt inexplicably relieved. He hurriedly put on his clothes and knocked on Mrs. Morrison's door. Mrs. Morrison, the Lord has returned. Summon the maids to prepare the Lord's bath water. Have the kitchen quickly prepare the supper. The procession has already set foot on Dosen Avenue. Okay, Mr. Carter, I will get up. Mrs. Morrison replied. Carter quickly summoned the serving men one by one and then continuously lit the lanterns, awakening the entire castle from the darkness. The Lord liked the light. He always said not to be afraid of wasting candles. Now that he had money, the castle quickly lit up with lanterns. This made the returning master on horseback feel especially good. List couldn't help but recall a song, Stars Light Up My Home, Let the Lost Child Find the Way. Feeling that it didn't quite fit the occasion, he recalled another poem, My Dada Horse's Hooves Are Beautiful Mistakes, I'm not a returnee, I'm a passerby. Fine. It didn't quite fit the occasion. For a moment, he couldn't find the right words to describe his current mood. In short, he was very excited. When he arrived at the castle gate, the servants were already lined up to greet him. The night is blessed by the glory. My lord, seeing you return safely, my heart is finally at ease. No need to worry, Mr. Carter. I just went into the forest to hunt and didn't encounter any danger. List smiled and said faintly, Tom, take my retainer knight and drive the caravan's carriages out. Later we will go to the Thorns Ridge and bring back all the prey we hunted. You will be very busy tonight. Yes, Lord, I will go. Tom responded. Carter looked at the night squad carrying the prey's corpses and understood that it would be a sleepless night, It is our honor to serve Lord. Has Mrs. Abby prepared supper? The kitchen has already started working. I had Mrs. Abby prepare portions for the entire night squad. Very good. When we return, we must drink to our heart's content and celebrate today's bountiful harvest. List did not dismount. Thomas, bring Dosen over. It is injured, bandage it. As you wish, Lord. List glanced at the unloaded prey and said, Mr. Carter, inform Teacher Gort that he can come and divide this batch of prey. Leave a part of the castle for the officials and the retainer knights' families. The remaining part will be supplied to the seafood shop at the same price as the seafood. These prey were referring to beasts. As for World of Warcraft, it certainly couldn't be handled like this. List wasn't that generous. Apart from selling World of Warcraft for money, meat was his exclusive food. At most, he would let his subordinates fish for some profit during banquets. After 2 trips in a row, they finally brought back all of today's harvest. They were piled up like a hill in front of the castle. The hall on the first floor was very lively. It was rare for the aristocratic system to be surpassed. The lord and the retainer were seated at the same table. Tonight's supper was comparable to a festive feast. List had the kitchen make a whole shadow snake into a snake chop, and the officials and retainers were given a large piece of the snake chop. World of Warcraft meat, which was rich in magic power, was a great tonic that they normally couldn't eat. Taking this opportunity, everyone gorged themselves, wishing they could even lick the plates. Outside the castle, Dosen was also given a large piece of snake chop. The glory of knights watches over the flower town, watches over Sir Lord, courage and wisdom are both present. I propose that we raise our glasses to List, who is favored by the knight's glory. The glory belongs to Sir Lord. Gort, holding a glass filled with gin, dominated the atmosphere of the banquet. Socializing and setting off the atmosphere were his specialties. The others raised their glasses and shouted, "The glory belongs to Sir Lord." Chapter 129. Although it was said that they would take down the entire Thorn's Ridge in one go, they still rested for 2 days. The main reason was that the night squad members had some minor injuries, and even Marcus had a bruise on his leg. With chi, minor injuries could be healed quickly. 2 days was enough time to relieve physical fatigue and scab over the wounds. List had no injuries on his body. After sleeping, he was 100 times more spirited and adjusted to his peak state. In high spirits, he galloped on the horse field, fiercely practicing the Fire-Dragon drill, fire surge fluctuations, and multiple arrows several times. He gained a lot of experience from this actual combat. He felt that the chi in his body had skyrocketed. Originally, he was just a delicate aristocrat, a rookie among the Earth Knights. Now that he had consolidated his foundation, he was taking big strides towards the elite Earth Knight. Compared to Marcus, he could almost fight to a draw. His experience was lacking and his chi was lacking. However, with magic eyes and the red blood sword, it was hard to say what would happen if he really fought. I think I should be able to fight Marcus one-on-one. List estimated. In the blink of an eye, he saw Dosen madly running on the horse field with its shiny fur, as if it had inexhaustible strength. List thought for a while. With Dosen's help, Marcus is by no means my opponent. In fact, I think that Dosen alone can be evenly matched with Marcus. After eating the bloodline fruit, it was impossible to see whether Dosen's bloodline had evolved or not. His knowledge in this area was still too little. However, Dosen's magic capacity had definitely skyrocketed. Previously, he could only release 10 or 20 rockthorns at most the previous day. Now he could release rockthorns from morning to night. He didn't dare to say that he could release 50 rockthorns, but 35 rockthorns was absolutely not a problem. For this reason, the progress of Dosen's path had greatly improved. Dosen, release your magic. Whoosh! A rock spike shot out from the ground. It was more than half the size of the rock spike that Dosen had released before. The stones produced in one day were equivalent to the stones produced in 3 to 4 days in the past. It was just like a small rock dragon. According to a knight novel named Mercenary of the World, dragons were a bit like dogs when they were young. All in all, Dosen, who had seen blood, was twice as strong as before. However, he was still a far cry from intermediate World of Warcraft. His recovery ability had increased explosively, and the wounds on his body were almost completely healed. Looking at Dosen's current performance, it's not a waste of the bloodline fruit. At the very least, it's much better than failing the evolution. For this purge, he was satisfied. The snakeskin of the dark shadow snake was an excellent material for making leather armor lining. Although there were some traces of being burned, it was still in good condition. It could be sold for at least 10 gold coins. Of the 2 flying dust dogs, one was charred black and could only be kept for List to eat. The other had its fur cut off by Marcus and could not be sold for a high price. The innards could be sold to mages, but most of them were kept for their own consumption. Currently the castle was not short of gold coins. The 2 tusks of the thunder tusk boar were excellent forging materials and were very suitable for making magic equipment. 1 tusk could be sold for at least 5 gold coins. In addition, the skin was also a good material for making leather armor. It could also be sold for 10 gold coins. The meat and bones could be kept for eating or sold. It would not be difficult to sell them for another 7 or 8 gold coins. With a huge body and thick skin, the Thundertusk boar was a treasure. There were also the 7 Windblade wolves. Because they were killed by Dosen, the wounds were not big and their fur was still in good condition. It would not be a problem to sell each of them for more than 10 gold coins. It was estimated that this batch of World of Warcraft could bring List at least 130 gold coins. The Thorns Ridge in the south has more or less been cleared. There should still be a lot of World of Warcraft left in the north, which should yield another 100 gold coins. By clearing the Thorns Ridge, not only can I get World of Warcraft meat and sell the materials for gold coins, but I can also temper the Night Squad and reduce the threat to the town. It is a good deal. It was a good deal, but there was only 1 batch of World of Warcraft. It would be gone after killing it. The Thorns Forest and the Thorns Ridge would also disappear. He had already ordered Gort to rebuild the logging team and make the Thorns Ridge a thing of the past. In addition, Blair was also preparing to establish a tree planting team. They would plant 2 kinds of thorns, fast-growing poisonous thorns and fast-growing thorns, on the outer edge of the Thorns Ridge. The fast-growing thorns grew extremely fast. As long as they were watered with fertilizer, they could grow a dozen centimeters in one night. Among them, the fast-growing poisonous thorns had been cultivated and had already covered several mu of land. Their roots could be dug out at any time and transplanted outside. The fast-growing thorns was discovered not long ago. It was the Smoke Mission's reward, a spiky variant of fast-growing thorns. Its branches were covered in thorns, densely packed with large and small spikes. It was very terrifying. The 2 kinds of thorns were used as hedges. They were not much of a threat to people. A gap could be made with a few shovels. However, the beasts in World of Warcraft would definitely feel despair. In fact, the Thorns forest trees have been cut down and World of Warcraft has no place to inhabit. The Thorns defense is no longer needed. However, in order to let others know that the Thorns Ridge is my Flower Town's territory, it is better to plant a ring of thorns. At the time of the enfeoffment, the Count had said that the Flower Town was List's territory. However, there was no clear official boundary between the Flower Town and the Flower Town. Similarly, the Thorns Ridge was previously an independent dangerous zone that did not belong to any town. After List occupied the Thorns Ridge, it became the de facto territory of the Flower Town. It was a reasonable use of a loophole. The area of the Thorns Ridge added up is at least the size of the Flower Town. In other words, my territory will be doubled in size. At least half of the land can be reclaimed as farmland. List didn't blush in the slightest when it came to his somewhat bandit approach. Instead, he was quite pleased with himself. If he had done this after Levis had inherited the title, then perhaps Levis would have fallen out with him. Aristocrats valued their land very much, and even brothers shouldn't think of taking advantage of it. However, the Count was his father now. What could he say if his son took advantage of a loophole and took the Thorns Ridge with great difficulty to take advantage of it? He wouldn't fuss with his son over this originally useless land. After drinking a mouthful of fresh coconut milk, List counted the time with his fingers. Today is September 14th, the Count's birthday on September 19th. He and Levis have already led the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry to the mainland to launch an assault. There is no need to hold a birthday banquet. By the end of this month, the Tulip Fleet should be able to return. At that time, the 500 serfs I bought will arrive. He planned to spend a week to thoroughly turn the Thorns Ridge upside down and hunt down all the World of Warcraft materials. He would spend another month to cut down all the trees and wait for the serfs to arrive before quickly reclaiming the wasteland. He would be able to plant a season of winter wheat before winter. 500 serfs are still not enough. After selling this batch of World of Warcraft materials and taking out some gold coins from the seafood business, I will have 600 gold coins to buy 2,500 serfs. Previously, 500 serfs, including 100 craftsmen, cost 120 gold coins. According to this ratio, 600 gold coins could buy 2,000 ordinary serfs and 500 craftsmen. Chapter 130. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The night squad once again set out for the northern Thorns Ridge. The successful cleanup of the southern Thorns Ridge boosted the squad's morale, and the young faces of the retainer knight had a trace of killing intent written on them. However, the main force of the cleanup squad wasn't the retainer knight, Marcus, or List. Instead, it was Dosen. It had become belligerent and energetic, practically tireless. From a small squirrel to a World of Warcraft's ice tree frog, everything was brutally ravaged by it. In particular, the low-ranked World of Warcraft's ice tree frog, which crouched on a branch and released the magic ice blade, randomly bombarding Dosen. However, Dosen had even learned to climb trees by himself. Despite the ice tree frog madly jumping, Dosen still pounced on it and bit it to death in a few bites, not even using rock thorns. The graceful bearing of the King of Thorns Ridge had already taken shape. Even if Dosen isn't an intermediate World of Warcraft, it isn't far from it. Sir, its fighting strength is getting stronger and stronger. I feel that it is still growing stronger. Marcus exclaimed in admiration when he saw Dosen holding the ice tree frog in its mouth, wagging its tail and eagerly placing the spoils of war next to Black Dragon. Raising a World of Warcraft with fighting strength, loyalty and courage was really too practical. List happily threw out a fried meat strip to reward Dosen. Dosen was a very picky eater. It didn't eat raw food and liked fried food the most. At first, I thought that the bloodline fruit was a failure, that it couldn't change its bloodline, and that it was still a flying dust dog. But now I can't easily come to a conclusion. Teacher Marcus, don't you feel that after 2 days in the Thorns Ridge, Dosen's body has grown a size? It has indeed grown a size. The current Dosen is as big as a tiger. An adult flying dust dog was at most comparable to the size of a leopard. Now Dosen had reached the size of a tiger and was still growing. List waved his hand, and Dosen scurried out again to continue its hunting mission. No matter what, Dosen is only half a year old. He's not an adult yet, but he's already this strong. When he becomes an adult, I'm afraid that no one below intermediate World of Warcraft will be his match. World of Warcraft generally developed quickly, but Dosen was obviously faster. In the castle, List had never mistreated it, serving it lavishly. Compared to normal World of Warcraft players who ate raw food in the forest, Dosen always ate cooked food which was more nutritious. In less than 3 months he could cast magic and in half a year he could fight against an adult in World of Warcraft. After eating the bloodline fruit, his body and mana skyrocketed, allowing him to crush World of Warcraft to the ground. When Dosen became an adult, apart from the purple sand crocodile, no one in Coral Island World of Warcraft would be a match for Dosen. While they were talking, Dosen encountered another World of Warcraft. It was a huge Thundertusk boar followed by 4 small Thundertusk boars. It was likely to be the same family as the Thundertusk boar in the south of the Thorns Ridge. Facing Dosen, the big boar was quite violent, but Dosen was far more cunning than imagined. He circled around and pounced, biting the small boar to death. He did not confront the big boar head-on. After the big boar's magic thunderbolt flash was exhausted, Dosen began to release rock thorns to tease the big boar. Finally, he found an opportunity to knock the Thundertusk boar to the ground, followed up with a rock thorn, pierced the Thundertusk boar's neck, and sent the boar's entire family back. Marcus held a bow and arrow but basically had no opportunity to use it. The timing of the magic release is just right. Dosen is very intelligent. Sir's training is very effective. List was similarly idle. It is indeed very intelligent. World of Warcraft relies on instinct while it relies on its brain. The more he looked at Dosen, the more satisfied he was. With Dosen, the cleanup mission was as easy as playing. Marcus did not let the retainer knight idle. When they encountered a lone Windblade wolf, he had List call back Dosen, and then arranged for the retainer knight to besiege the Windblade wolf. This is an old and feeble Windblade wolf. It has already begun to shed its fur. It should have been driven out by the pack of wolves. I'll leave it to you. In the end, at the cost of 3 injured retainer knight, the 10 retainer knight jointly besieged and killed the Windblade wolf. The prey hung from a tree. The team continued deeper. They were about to reach the seaside, which meant that the northern Thorns Ridge was about to be cleansed. The harvest was not very bountiful. There were only 1 big and 4 small Thundertusk boars, 1 ice tree frog and 1 Windblade wolf, for a total of 6 World of Warcraft. A lot of wild beasts were hunted, but List had no interest in them. After getting used to eating World of Warcraft meat, wild beast meat could only be regarded as inferior food. Unfortunately, the Thorns Woods are about to disappear. The Flower Town will no longer have a habitat for World of Warcraft. In the future, if I want to eat World of Warcraft meat, I can only buy it outside. The harvest from the cleanup of the Thorns Ridge was enough for him to eat for about half a year. After eating it, he would have to spend a lot of money to buy World of Warcraft meat. Marcus was very open-minded. When the Thorns Ridge is developed into farmland, the castle's tax revenue will be greatly increased. Sir can naturally use gold coins to buy World of Warcraft meat. Moreover, at that time, the black tulip and flame mushroom magic ingredients will also bring in a lot of income. The flower town will become more and more prosperous. I still have to open up more sources of income. In the future, not only will I have to eat, but I will also have to nurture the Knight Squad. The success of the World of Warcraft hunt gave rise to List's ambition. I hope that my knight can obtain true glory for me in the next development order. Lord needs more land. Marcus's eyes shone. I am willing to serve, sir. Woof woof. Dosen suddenly shouted, interrupting the beautiful vision of the Lord and the knight. List conveniently released magic eyes and looked around. Then he saw signs of magic in the distance. A World of Warcraft was lurking not far away. I didn't expect to find a World of Warcraft so close to the seaside. Dosen, go. After receiving the order, Dosen dashed forward and rushed towards the World of Warcraft. It had clearly sensed the World of Warcraft's aura earlier than List. List and the others followed it unhurriedly. From time to time, Dosen's barks could be heard, as well as the barking of another dog. I didn't expect there to be a flying dust dog. Marcus deduced from the barks that the World of Warcraft was a flying dust dog. That's normal. 4 flying dust dogs to reproduce in the Thorns Ridge, it is impossible for there to be only 2 or 3 of them. In fact, I think that there might be some fish that slipped through the net. The Thorns Ridge is unlikely to have only 1 shadow snake or 1 ice tree frog. There might even be winged peregrine falcons in the vicinity. After a pause, List continued, of course it's hard to say. 18 years ago, when the flower town had yet to be built, this place was covered in forests, which were cleared out by the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry. The shadow snake and the ice tree frog might have slipped through the net at that time. After all, World of Warcraft can live for many years. Compared to ordinary wild beasts, World of Warcraft had a longer lifespan. In theory, they could live to the present. The Flying Dust Dog, Windblade Wolf, and Thundertusk Boar had all found breeding partners and could continue to reproduce. As for the Shadow Snake and the Ice Tree Frog, there was a great chance that they would go extinct, but their bloodlines might continue. They could copulate with wild beasts. There was no absolute reproductive isolation between World of Warcraft and wild beasts of the same species. It was a common occurrence for World of Warcraft to rape wild beasts and give birth to World of Warcraft beasts. List's mount, Fire Dragon, was a descendant of World of Warcraft's fiery horse and an ordinary horse. The reproduction of a species was always up and down. Sometimes it would evolve, sometimes it would decline. World of Warcraft would not always be World of Warcraft. Suddenly, Chapter 131. When List approached on horseback, he saw a scene that was hard to look at. Dosen was actually riding on the Flying Dust Dog, constantly shaking and panting with its tongue hanging out. The Flying Dust Dog under his crotch should be a female dog. It wanted to struggle but could not, and could only let out a series of screams. Seeing a human approaching, it instinctively wanted to escape, but Dosen just pressed it down, using its sturdy body to forcibly keep the female Flying Dust Dog in place. Ouch. List frowned in disgust. Such a shameless act of violence was actually happening in broad daylight? Was it a twisted dog or a moral degeneration? Was it an outburst of sex or a helpless thirst? He turned his head and asked, Teacher Marcus, Dosen should only be a half-year-old puppy, right? When we found Dosen, it had not opened its eyes yet, so it was definitely born not long ago. Therefore, Dosen should not be very old. It is definitely not a year old, at most 7 months old. A 7-month-old dog can do this kind of thing? Marcus gave a rare smile. Sir, dogs and humans are definitely different. With Dosen's age, it is indeed a bit early, but it is not uncommon for dogs to start mating before a year old. It can only be said that Dosen has developed very well, and with the stimulation of the bloodline fruit, it should be completely mature. List used to raise dogs in his hometown, but that was when he was a child. Moreover, the rural dogs did not care about when they were in heat or when they were messing around. Basically, they were a group of dogs that would stick together when they had nothing to do. After hearing Marcus's explanation, he was no longer surprised. Standing not far away, he enjoyed the action blockbuster. Dosen's physical strength was very good. From the time it heard the screams to the time it stopped moving, it had lasted for about 20 minutes. But the end of the movement did not mean that the matter was over. The two flying dust dogs were obviously like ordinary dogs, they did not immediately separate and were still connected. Woof woof. Dosen seemed a little confused and barked twice. The female violent dog stopped screaming and wanted to escape, but she couldn't pull Dosen away. She could only stare blankly at the night vigilantly, ready to release magic at any time. However, the distance between it and the night was beyond the range of its magic, so the rock thorns could not attack the humans. Strangely enough, it did not attack Dosen either. "Sir, should we take this opportunity to kill this flying dust dog?" Marcus picked up his bow and arrow, eager to give it a try. At this time, the female flying dust dog was a live target. No. List immediately stopped her. If the bitch went berserk, wouldn't it drag Dosen to death? He had seen a video of a female dog dragging a male dog by the side of the road. Her steps were light, but the male dog seemed to be dead. "Teacher Marcus, think of a way to capture this female flying dust dog alive and raise her in the castle. Now, it seems that Dosen is already an adult and can breed offspring. Perhaps I can get a group of flying dust dogs. But the female flying dust dog is wild and difficult to tame. It is very dangerous. Then tie her up with an iron chain, delimit the surrounding 20 meters as a restricted area, and then build a rock wall around it. After she gives birth to a batch of puppies, then take the puppies away. In any case, there are not many flying dust dogs on the Coral Island. Dosen will always need female dogs. That is also a way." Marcus nodded, then turned to the retainer knight and said, "Take out the net. Jim and York go to the tree on the left. Philip and Sean go to the tree on the right. Xavier and Tracy go to the tree behind. Surround the flying dust dog. If it tries to escape, immediately catch it with the net." The knight cautiously approached and climbed up the tree. One of them pulled one end of the net rope, ready to cast the net. About 20 minutes later, the two flying dust dogs naturally separated. The female flying dust dog immediately turned around to escape. The prepared Marcus immediately ordered, "Prepare to cast the net." The knight immediately threw away the rope in their hands, and a large net enveloped the female flying dust dog. The female flying dust dog was very fast, but not as fast as the knight. It was directly covered by the large net. It hurriedly released magic. Rock thorns pierced the ground, but these rock thorns only pushed the net away and could not pierce the large net. It struggled to escape, but the net became tighter and tighter. Eventually, it was tightly bound and could not budge. The rock thorns pierced randomly until it exhausted its magic power, but it still could not escape. Woof woof. Dosen just watched from the side. He neither pounced on it to bite it, nor did he walk away. He just barked at the female flying dust dog from time to time, but the meaning was unclear. Its magic power should be exhausted. Go down and tie it up. First tie its mouth. Marcus tried a few times and came to a conclusion. Soon, the female flying dust dog was firmly tied up, especially its mouth. Even if it recovered its magic power, it could not easily release magic. Woof woof. With its mouth and limbs bound, the female flying dust dog kept growling angrily. However, its fate was already sealed. It would become Dosen's plaything and the flying dust dog's reproduction machine. Woof woof. Wagging his tail, Dosen circled around the female flying dust dog and barked. It was unknown whether he was comforting it or not. This should be the last World of Warcraft, right? List quietly summoned the smoke mission. Judging through the smoke mission was the most intuitive manifestation. However, there was no change in the smoke serpentines. Mission. You have launched an attack and are determined to clean up the Thorns Ridge and create a new peaceful environment for the Flower Town. Therefore, complete the massacre of all World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge in one go. Reward, the Trail of the Black Dragon Horses. He couldn't help but frown. There is still World of Warcraft? He had already thoroughly searched the Thorns Ridge. With the help of magic eyes, it was reasonable to say that all the World of Warcraft that could be found within his line of sight had already been found. It seemed that the World of Warcraft had avoided being cleaned up while his magic eyes was recovering. "Sir, we are almost at the seaside. Should we go back?" Marcus asked. List pondered for a moment and then said, "There is no hurry. Let's go to the seaside and take a look. I heard from Costo that there is a deep water port near the seaside. Let's take a look at it and make plans as soon as possible to build the Flower Town's dock." "As you wish." The team moved on. Trembling Woods was attracted by the beauty and lost his interest in hunting. He kept circling around the flying dust dog. Fortunately, the journey was very smooth. They didn't even see 2 or 3 wild beasts before they reached the seaside. After walking along the seaside for a difficult stony path, they arrived at the place Costo had mentioned. It was a several hundred-meter wide rocky beach. On the left was a rocky mountain ridge and on the right was a rocky mountain ridge. Only the area in the middle was only littered with large and small gravel. With a bit of cleaning, a flat area could be cleared. Costo wasn't lying. A large seaport could not be built here, but a small and medium-sized dock was not a problem. After walking around the rocky area, List suddenly had an idea. On the way back, we will go directly in the direction of the dairy farm. First we will look for a flat road. Then we will have the logging team start cutting down trees and open a road to this place as soon as possible. The stones near the dock can be pulled back to build a road. This will be the starting point of the flower town's future. He reached out and made a circle on the rocky beach. Chapter 132. Because the mission had not yet been completed, List returned to the castle to rest for a day, and then continued to take Dosen and the retainer knight to the Thorns Ridge. He was ready to hunt down the fish that escaped the net. The female flying dust dog was still tied up. In order to grind away its fierceness, List decided to starve it for 3 to 5 days so that it could not release magic to hurt people. At the same time, the Thorns caravan had been arranged to go to North Valley City to order an iron cage. It was destined to spend the rest of its life in an iron cage. Perhaps one day, it would become familiar with its new life, follow Dosen and regain its freedom. Dosen should be able to deal with it. After all, Dosen is an existence that almost became an intermediate World of Warcraft. List was very confident about this. Flying dust dogs may not live in packs in World of Warcraft, but it was the consistent character of World of Warcraft to submit to the strong. Moreover, it was a male and a female. Woof woof. Dosen, who was chasing its tail in circles in the distance, felt a little dizzy. Still too young. Since it has become your wife, it's time to give it a name. It is a flying dust dog and it is also your wife, so call it, Stupid Woman. List seriously thought of a name. Dosen, do you agree with this name? If you agree, bark twice. Woof woof. Dosen, who was still chasing its tail, expressed its approval. List entered the Thorns Ridge again. Without Stupid Woman to attract his attention, Dosen regained the demeanor of the King of Thorns Ridge. Along the way he kept looking for beasts to kill. All of them were lone beasts that had escaped the net. Unfortunately, another 3 days passed. He did not find any World of Warcraft. List felt that his magic eyes were so proficient that he could use them seamlessly and keep them open 24 hours a day. There was still no sign of magic, as if World of Warcraft had hidden under the surface and begun to pass the winter. It was the end of summer and the beginning of autumn, so it was impossible to hibernate. So, where are the fish that escaped the net hiding? Riding on Black Dragon, List looked at the logging team that was cutting down trees in full swing not far away, feeling somewhat conflicted. If he didn't complete the quest, he wouldn't be able to get the clue to the Black Dragon horses that he wanted. The clue was probably hidden in the Thorns Forest, but he had already cleaned it twice and still hadn't found any clues. He could only pin his hopes on completing the quest. If he couldn't find it, then he couldn't find it. In the end, List could only order, Teacher Marcus, lead the retainer knight to continue training in the Thorns Ridge and protect the logging team. If you encounter a World of Warcraft, fight if you can and flee if you can't. Yes, my lord. The smoke mission was a difficult problem. Spoil the mood. However, it was not that there was no good news in the past few days. The crystal craftsman had successfully ground the required concave and convex lenses, a total of 20 pieces. List experimented with random combinations and found that a convex lens and a concave lens could form a telescope. 2 convex lenses could also form a telescope, but the image was inverted. He naturally chose a combination of convex and concave lenses, and had the blacksmith shop's blacksmith and the carpenter shop's carpenter work together to create the lens tube. The lens tube was about a meter long, and after embedding the lens, the magnification wasn't high. However, List was already very satisfied and named it the List telescope. At night, he aimed the telescope at the moon in the sky. After fine-tuning the distance of the lens, the dark areas of the moon were immediately captured in his eyes. However, what made List feel strange was that the moon he saw actually had a hazy halo around it. List, who had a superficial understanding of astronomy, quickly recognized it. Atmosphere. This moon actually has an atmosphere. If it has an atmosphere, it shouldn't be inhabited by intelligent life forms, right? He suddenly recalled that this world had all kinds of mystical legends about the moon. In some legends, the imperial family of the unsetting Radiance Empire came from the moon. In some legends, the Elven King lived on the moon. In some legends, the moon was the homeland of dragons. In some legends, the most central mountain range of the continent, the Mulla Gaudin Mountain, had a magic teleportation array leading to the moon at its peak. Whoever could climb Mulla Gaudin Mountain and light the magic teleportation array would be able to grasp the endless wealth of the moon. This legend was a bit like the myth of Chang'e flying to the moon. Everyone knew it was fake, but in their hearts, they yearned for it. The magic teleportation array was said to have been researched by ancient magic shooters. It was a huge magic that could cross time and space, but it had been lost a long time ago and only existed in legends. Mulla Gaudin Mountain was the highest mountain range on the continent, tens of thousands of meters high, and mortals simply could not climb to the top. Even riding a dragon, it was impossible to fly to the highest peak. The endless storms halfway up the mountain were more terrifying than the most powerful wind magic, and could twist people and dragons into pieces. As for the name, Mulla Gaudin, it was a translation from a foreign language. To be precise, it was an ancient language called Language of the Moon. Language of the Moon was the language of the Moon Empire, a long time ago, and now it was no longer used by any country. However, the languages of many countries were integrated with Language of the Moon, and even directly used some of the words of Language of the Moon. The term Mulla Gaudin meant Guardian Knight of the Moon Empire. Some people said that Mulla Gaudin Mountain meant Knight of the Moon Empire. There were also people who far-fetched and said that Mulla Gaudin Mountain meant Knight of the Magic Teleportation Array between the moons. In any case, Mulla Gaudin Mountain can lead to the moon, was a legend that everyone knew. So, are these legends true or false? It is no longer appropriate to judge this world with the common sense of Earth. It is hard to say whether there are really people on the moon. Liszt used to be a staunch atheist, but now he had become an agnostic. There was no worship of God in this world, but there were all kinds of strange legends, which were very suitable for the development of agnosticism. Even though he could not figure out the meaning of the moon. At the banquet that day, Liszt still announced in a loud voice, "The invention of the Liszt telescope is a major step forward in human exploration of the universe. It will unveil the veil of the universe and show it to all of us." He was very excited about his discovery and wanted to share it with the people. However, when his subordinates rushed to look at the telescope and used it to observe the moon, the feedback was somewhat disappointing. Gort looked at the moon and muttered, "Is this the moon? It looks really beautiful. Is it a big flat cake? Why are there no dragons and no elven king?" Blair looked at the moon and whispered, "The light of the moon is too weak, much weaker than the light of the sun. Some places seem to be about to be extinguished." The extinguished places he was talking about were the areas on the moon where the shadows were heavier. It might be the plains on Earth's moon, or it might be the real lunar sea. The magnification of Liszt's telescope was still not enough. At most, it could magnify by more than 30 times, so the observation of the moon was not clear enough. Moreover, there was the atmosphere blocking the view. Isaiah did not look at the moon. He wanted to see the stars, but there were only a few stars in the background of the moon. After looking at the moon, Marcus's face was very calm. "Sir, why are we looking at the moon? Ignorant natives." Liszt's original excitement had disappeared, and he felt lonely as if he was the only sober person among the crowd. Fortunately, he was very good at adjusting his state of mind, and the self-restraint of a noble quickly calmed him down. He smiled in a formal manner. "Not only can it see the moon, but it can also see far away. With the telescope, the scenery far away will be in front of you. You can use it to observe World of Warcraft." You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.